Evening, everybody. Sarah, are you in Texas? No? I thought maybe you were cold and didn't have heat, or you were freezing with the blanket and everything.
No, you're funny. I just am chilly by nature, so I always have a blanket. Like I always have the fuzzy blanket and probably 3 pairs of socks and a scarf. Don't judge, Pete.
Couldn't resist.
I can be an easy target, I know. You're welcome.
We're just going to give it another minute before we get started. We're still missing some members here. All right, everyone, let's get started with the right to know stuff first, and we'll allow a couple of minutes for, I did get one text about one of our members being slightly late. Ellen's joining us right now, so that's awesome. And Ms. Hinckley was not able to join us this evening, so let's get started. Today, we'll be conducting a school board meeting of the SAU 39 Consolidated School Board. Before we get started, I'll read through a checklist to ensure that the meeting that we are holding is in compliance with the right to know law. As chairperson of the SAU 39 Consolidated School Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 and its extensions, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. In accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that, number one, we're providing public access to the meeting by telephone, with additional access possible by video and other electronic means. We're utilizing Zoom for this electronic meeting. All meetings of the school board and selected district staff have the ability to communicate contemporaneously in this meeting through this platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch or listen to this meeting on Zoom and via phone by following the directions and links provided on our website, www.sau39.org. We have provided public notice of the necessary information for accessing this meeting. We're providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are any problems with access. If anyone has a problem, please email awallace@sau39.org. Again, that's A for Amy, Wallace, common spelling, at sau39.org. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting, we will adjourn and reschedule. Please note that all votes taken during this meeting shall be done by a roll call vote. Finally, let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance, where each member will state their presence. Please also state where they are and if anyone else is in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Let's start off with Ms. Kuzma.
I am at home alone.
Thank you. Mr. Goffier.
I am home and in my office all by myself.
Great. Ms. Beam.
I am home in my office, but likely to be joined by my husband on the other side of the room, not paying attention to me.
Awesome. Ms. Grugin.
Home alone.
Mr. Conklin.
Home alone.
Mr. Gronstra. I believe he's going to be joining us a couple of minutes late. Ms. Facey.
Home alone.
Mr. Coughlin.
Home alone.
Ms. Taylor. Ms. Taylor.
Home alone.
Thank you. Mr. Torres.
Home alone.
Thank you. Ms. Grund.
I'm at my dad's house in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm alone.
Snowing, I hope.
Yes.
Mr. Glover.
I'm in transit alone. We'll be home in a bit alone and present.
Thank you. Ms. Lawrence.
Home in Mount Vernon and alone.
Mr. Eckhoff.
I am home alone with two cute and quiet dogs right now.
Nice. Mr. St. Dennis.
Home alone.
Great. And Stephen O'Keefe as your chairperson, and I am home and alone. So let's get started. Actually, we're going to move on to our consent agenda items first. I will entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda 1 through 6.
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Kuzma. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Coughlin. Seeing no objections, let's go ahead and do a roll call. I'm sorry, Ms. Greg, go ahead.
Stephen, I have a correction to the January 21st minutes. It's a small one.
Okay, sure.
And it's on page 27 of the agenda, line 265. It just says, Mrs. Grund remarked that he can inform them of the process, and it says, but the school board can object to this process anyway. What I really was saying is that there's nothing in the what were we voting on? My mind is gone. There's nothing in the process that says we can object to his process. So it just needs to be corrected.
Okay,
That's it.
great. And Danae's got that. Anything else in those minutes? Ms. Taylor.
Yes, Kelly Braley is the athletic director. She was listed as the dean of students.
Okay. Do you know what page or what line that's on?
No. Sorry.
I found it. It's
Okay.
line 125, page 23.
Great. We'll have Danae make that correction as well. Thank you, Laura. Mr. Goffier.
Just had a quick question for Roger on the facilities report. Installing new dividers for student desks. Are these plexiglass dividers? Or are these dividers for COVID-19? What are the dividers, and are we doing this in the upper levels, AMS and Sauhegan at some point as well?
So that's a great question, Tom. The dividers actually came from the building administration for Clark Wilkins and AMS. As far as the custodial staffing, I included it in there. They just really delivered them to the classrooms, helped set them up. But yes, they are COVID related devices.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Grund?
Yeah, quick question, Roger, also on your facility update. It looks like you're measuring water at each of the buildings. Can I just ask if there's a concern or a reasoning?
I just really like all of the details on all of the buildings, really. Just really how much water are we using per day? How many students are within the building? I just really looking for all the details on the buildings and how it operates is really all that is.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Seeing nothing further, let's go ahead and call the vote. Ms. Kuzma to accept consent agenda items number 1 through 6.
Kuzma, yes.
Mr. Gothier.
Gothier, yes.
Ms. Beam.
Beam, yes.
Ms. Grugin.
Grugin, yes.
Mr. Conklin.
Conklin, yes.
Mr. Gronstra. Still not present. Ms. Facey.
Facey, yes.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Torres.
Torres, yes.
Ms. Grund.
Grund, yes.
Mr. Glover.
Glover, yes.
Ms. Lawrence.
Lawrence, yes.
Mr. Eckhoff.
Eckhoff, yes.
Mr. St. Dennis.
St. Dennis, yes.
Great. That passes. O'Keefe, yes, as well. That passes with 2 not present. Awesome. Let's move on. So for members of the public that are watching either at home on Facebook or in this interaction through Zoom, first of all, I want to welcome you. Your fellow board members and I always love when the public attend and provide their feedback and helps us sort of stay connected with where your thoughts are. And I know there's some topics tonight that are of particular interest, and that's the reason why we've got so many folks with us, but it's awesome. And I encourage you that if you do have feedback, please provide it during our open comment, public comment period. And we're going to be actually coming to one right now. There's going to be a total of 3 public comment periods. The first one, I encourage folks to use the raise your hand feature, where I will call on you and allow you to have the floor for a total of 3 minutes to let us know whatever's on your mind. After that period's closed, we're going to be having a presentation by our superintendent discussing our school start time changes for next school year, FY 21-22 calendar year. And then Ms. Beam is going to give us a quick presentation with regards to why the school board is entertaining this particular idea. The board's going to have an opportunity then to discuss the superintendent's recommendation for the proposed start time changes. And then we're going to actually open up the floor for additional public comment for specifically the school start time changes prior to us calling a vote or taking a vote. After that public comment period, one of our board members will make a motion in the affirmative to adopt the proposed schedule changes. And then the board will then discuss and provide feedback and guidance where each member will have an opportunity to share their perspective and their point of view. We'll take a vote, and then we will move on to the superintendent's report where there are 2 items in that particular item that we're going to cover. And then we're going to have a 3rd public comment period as well. So either public comment period or any of the public comment periods or all the public comment periods, I encourage you to use your raise your hand feature and we'll allow you to have the floor for the 3 minutes. So we're going to start off actually now with Ms. Gibson. Marilyn Gibson, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, the town, and your address, please.
My name is Marilyn Gibson. I'm at 166 Mack Hill Road, Amherst, and that's the size of it.
Thank you.
I would first like to thank the admin of SAU 39 for keeping in contact with the parents and whomever else has signed up for their announcements. I also want to thank them for engaging our students through the last year. I also would like to say thank you to our Ways and Means team, specifically for the Amherst School Board, for keeping me well informed as a newbie on the team. I do have a couple of concerns, though, that I would like to bring up. First of all, there is a fiscal responsibility that I see that this is on my own. This is as a resident, by the way, not for Ways and Means. This is as a resident. I've been a resident for 26 years. I've also been a teacher for 29 years. I've also been on a school board in Rhode Island, and I'm also a substitute teacher. But I would like to say that duplication of jobs, specifically in the SAU staff, is fiscally unsound. I would also like to say that there have been costly expenditures over the last couple of years in regards to software, specifically the grading system and connections with parents on the grading system that is being used. I also find that there's a tracking history over the last year and a half through school board meetings, specifically the Amherst School Board and the SAU. I have found that there has been a second assistant superintendent assigned. I know what the history is, but I'm finding that that is duplicating what curriculum coordinators do and what interventionists do. So I'm very disappointed with that selection of a second assistant superintendent. I feel as though if everybody was doing their job correctly, that would not have been needed. I think there's more transparency that is needed, and that the curriculum administrator that was in position was doing a fine job, and that a second assistant superintendent was not necessary, and a new position is just costly. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Any other members of the public that would like to have the floor to share their concerns, questions, comments, concerns? Ms. Watkins, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, your address, and the town in which you reside.
Hi, my name is Jenny Watkins. I live at 17 Eastern Ave in Amherst. My comment is in particular to the school start times. I am one of the parents. I have 2 current elementary students and a third about to join next year, and I am very concerned about the school start times. And what I would like to ask the board as they listen to tonight's presentations is really think about what is an acceptable time for an elementary school student to be waking up and getting to a particular bus stop. From the research that I've seen and the documents that were provided earlier in this particular study, I'm concerned about the nature of the research that we were using to begin with. On top of that, there have been a multitude of articles published that really questions the fact on if we are just shifting the problem to a different generation, to our younger students. So as we continue forward with this conversation tonight, I am really, really asking the board to think about, is it appropriate to have elementary school students at a bus stop by 6:30 in the morning when it is dark, and having them wake up close to 5:30 in order to be there on time, when we have kindergartners that are the size of 2-year-olds. My kindergartner next year is the average size of a 2-year-old. That is not an appropriate condition to be having these kids out. And I really please ask you to think about that as we're having this conversation tonight, because I'm genuinely concerned about the safety and well-being of our elementary students as we go forward with the proposal. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins. Next is Miss Tower. Miss Tower, if you can state your address, town that you reside in, and you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you so very much. Erin Tower, 29 Border Street in Amherst. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Steele and the school board. I know none of this has been easy around school start times. I appreciate the work that you have put into this. My one concern and the one thing I would like the school board to keep in mind as they're discussing and voting tonight about school start times. Many of us parents have moved to Amherst for the schools and for the special education program that's one of the best in the state. However, I honestly feel like many times our special education and special needs students are overlooked in the decisions that are being made in the school district. I have a major concern about my elementary school student, special needs student, not being able to come home straight away after school to an older sibling. I now need to try to find an after-school program that will accept him when many of our after-school programs in the area will not take our special needs students. They are supposedly unequipped to handle them. I would really appreciate it if the school board took into consideration the special needs and special education students when they're making their decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tower. And as a reminder to the public, if you'd like to address the school board, I ask that you use your raise your hand feature on the Zoom interface, and you'll be called on and you'll have the opportunity to address the school board. Reminding that there are going to be a total of 3 public comment periods this evening. Ms. Hallett, you have the floor. Please state your name, your address, and the town in which you reside in.
Lauren Hallett, 8 Old Lantern Way at Amherst.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to come on tonight, try to offer a little bit of a different perspective about the new start times. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the high school because I have high schoolers, but I think a lot of this applies to all 3 schools. You know, overwhelmingly, the high school students were not in favor of the later start change. We're really concerned about the release time. We've only cut 15 minutes off from when Adam paused the last conversation, and that's still a concern. 3:30 is late, and 3:30 really runs the high schoolers specifically into some big issues that don't seem solvable unless we move that dismissal time earlier. The high schoolers have had a lot of change. They really are looking for consistency moving forward next year. They have been looking forward to returning to what they know, their consistency, for a while now. So this is really hard to swallow as a parent of 2 high schoolers who have been looking forward to that. And now we're going to tell them that everything around them is going to change again. Also, most schools that have shifted across the country to these later start and end times have had severe graduation rate issues, also severe attendance issues. And this change was looking to solve that. Here in Amherst, as far as I know, we have neither. And in fact, in districts across the country that have made that shift, it has been shown that it hasn't been as helpful as they thought, because high schoolers who wake up to an empty house, so their parents have gone to work and their siblings have gone to school, are less likely to get out of bed and attend school on a regular basis than if a parent or siblings are there, the family's getting ready together, and they're all leaving around the same time. I think also when we're talking about sleep, we all know how imperative health and growth, sleep is for health and growth, but it has been shown that the average hours of sleep do not change for teens with later start times. What happens is the teens end up having to wake up around 5 or 6 a.m. to finish what they didn't the night before, or alternatively, they're staying up till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. So they're still only averaging 6 hours of sleep a night. So for our high school kids, this doesn't solve any of their sleep problems that they might be having. And the last thing I'm asking for the board to consider is that this idea of later start times and later dismissal times, it really is a privilege that a lot of students and their families cannot afford. Businesses that hire teens, they're not open in the morning. High schoolers aren't going to be able to make up the hour of part-time work lost 5 days a week by doing something in the morning before school. The average part-time working teen is going to lose about 2 hours a day or 10 hours of pay a week. That's a lot that we're asking of them. Also, when you think about
Ms. Hallett, you have a 15-second extension.
okay. Also, when you think about high schoolers and what they have to do after school, it's just as important as what they're doing in school for their future. And so I'm just asking that you reconsider this time shift and that you really concentrate on doing what's right for the high schoolers and keeping their dismissal time as early as possible. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Other members of the public that wish to address the board, please use your raise the hand feature in the Zoom software. Ms. Harrison. Ms. Harrison, you have the floor. Please state your name, your address, and the town in which you reside, and you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I have a toddler watching a show, so hopefully he'll maintain that for a little bit. My name is Lindsay Harrison. I live at 23 Simeon Wilson in Amherst. I just wanted to talk to you this evening about how I'm a little disappointed at what's happened over the past 2 weeks. But I think we can all agree that, the times are very difficult with either students being remote, in person. We've had students pulled out of class for exposure. These aren't normal, and I know that we're all struggling. But I was really pleased a couple weeks ago that Mr. Steele was nice enough to listen to the community and have his YouTube about what the changes he was going to make with their start times. And I really am disappointed with what's happened in the last 24 hours. I've watched all the board meetings. I've watched all the meetings that you've had. We had one yesterday, and I just feel like everything has been changed so much in the last 24 hours. And I just wanted to ask the board that as a community, you just listen to the surveys, listen to the YouTube of what was maybe promised to us, and really consider what was said last week in the YouTube by our dear superintendent, who I know worked so hard. I do realize that, but I just feel like there's been a lot of changes made in the last 24 hours that we weren't really promised.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Moving to Ms. Erickson. Ms. Erickson, you have the floor. Please state your name, your address, and the town in which you reside. You have the floor for 3 minutes. Ms. Erickson, you just want to hit unmute, please. Ms. Erickson, you're still on mute. Great, Ms. Erickson, we'll come back to you as soon as we figure out what the technology issue is there. Let's move on to Ms. Gascoigne. Ms. Gascoigne, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Shannon Gascoigne, Parker Farm Lane, Amherst. I've been following school board meetings, specifically the issue of start time, since my oldest, who's a 6th grader now, was in 1st grade at Wilkins. Over the years, I've experienced a range of opinions, thoughts, and emotions around this issue. One of hope, being followed by frustration, being followed by disappointment, and irritation and impatience at the time that it has taken the boards and the district to make a decision. At times, I felt like I've been on a hamster wheel where we keep having the same conversations repeatedly taking place, but no final resolution. However, I'm here tonight to say thank you to the administration, to the school board members, to all the parents and students in our community who have taken the time over the years to consider all aspects of any plan that has been put forward, to really engage, discuss, and consider the ripple effects that big shifts naturally bring. Making a systemic change is really hard, even if it's for the right reasons. I've listened to all the board meetings this month regarding the schedule changes at the high school and the middle school and the elementary school. I was at Superintendent Steele's parent session yesterday afternoon. And while my own family and personal situations aren't completely fulfilled in each scenario, I have kids in different schools. I really believe that this plan, as it's now being put forward, has all of the elements required to serve the greatest academic good for our students in a way that causes the least dominoes to fall. Primarily, I like this plan because it focuses on providing an educational and academic experience during a school day time that is best suited for learning at each age and stage. I also like that this plan took into account the better outcomes for our students' academic performance, their physical and cognitive growth, while preserving some of the things that we as a community have voiced as being important, such as extra club time, flex time, time for athletics, and extra supports. At the elementary school, I've heard parents over the years talk about the need for extended recess, extended lunchtime, extended outdoor time. These were all things that Superintendent Steele mentioned in his Q&A session yesterday. So I'm really pleased with that as well. So while it doesn't, meet the needs of my family 100%, I still support the board in moving this vote tonight. And regardless of where it all ends up, I appreciate your thoughtful deliberation and consideration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. Let's move on to Ms. Carroll. Ms. Carroll, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and town in which you reside.
Hello, my name is Tracy Carroll, 6 Brander Court, Amherst. I want to echo Shannon's sentiments of saying thank you for trying to make a best plan that will reach the most and provide the best education options for our students. I had student in 1st and 3rd grade currently. I will be transitioning into the middle school before we know it, and I understand the importance of providing optimal time for our students to learn. The previous YouTube video that Superintendent Steele had sent out with the concern for having the elementary students start after 9 o'clock was extremely concerning for me. I cannot fathom having my 1st grader being able to be instructed through that late afternoon time with any success, and therefore would feel that that would not provide a proper quality of instruction. The current start time, again, for most will hopefully fit what we can. It doesn't fit my family 100% either, but I think this is going to reach the best solution for most, and I appreciate that. I want to consider that these elementary level learners really do need to be in school earlier and not at the later time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Erickson, let's give it another shot. Ms. Erickson, you have the floor for 3 minutes. And please state your name, address, and town in which you reside.
Hi, thanks for giving me a second shot. Lisa Erickson, 31 North Main Street in Mount Vernon. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate the voices of some of the other elementary kids. I have 3 elementary, 1st grade, kindergarten, and 1 that's not started yet. If the current bus schedule stays as it was previous years, I would be trying to get my kids onto the bus by 6:45 or 6:50 in the morning, which just seems very unreasonable for that age to be waking them up so early in the morning. Currently, my kids don't even wake up until 7:30 in the morning, and I know some of that can change, but I also think that there's other options. I know that the later start time is important for the high school as well, but I think at this point, especially where we've got remote options as well, there's other options that maybe hadn't been considered in the past. I'm new to the school, so I haven't seen all the past years of discussion on this, but it seems like there could be discussion on possibly starting remote earlier or later in the morning for certain children, or having later classes in the afternoon for certain children, remote if they don't do so well in the mornings, or even having a rolling start for the high schoolers where half the buses run at 7:30 and half the buses run at 9:30 type of thing. It just seems like there's other considerations that could have been taken into account to help out and not disrupt the elementary students as much. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Erickson. Let's move on to Ms. Yates. Ms. Yates, please state your name, address, and the town in which you reside, and you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Kiara Yates. I'm at 13 Ponema Hill Road in Amherst. And I just want to thank the school board and Mr. Steele for all the hard work in trying to accommodate everybody's desire for a different time schedule. And I support the new time schedule that is being proposed. I think it is more conducive to learning for the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. It's not perfect. It won't make everybody happy. But in my experience, since I come from a school district where middle school and high school did go later, I can tell you it does work and it does help for the teenagers to have a later start. So I'm in full support of the new schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yates. Seeing no other hands raised from the public, we'll close out public comment period for this part. However, before I do that, without objection, I'm going to submit multiple emails that were received by myself and my fellow board members to the record for Danae. They've been transcribed and entered into a PDF that's been forwarded to all the board members on both sides of the issue, both for and against, and providing feedback as well. So let's move on to our presentation from our school superintendent, Mr. Steele. Mr. Steele, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by saying to our school board and our community, a genuine thank you for this process. I hope this is the way we make difficult decisions as a community, because as administration and a school board, we have been entrusted with a lot of authority and a lot of responsibility. And while we can make these decisions in a vacuum, and we could have made these decisions years ago, I think that our community has made this process better. As I hear some of the public comments, I can understand even the frustration about how changes have happened throughout this process. But I will say that our community, in my opinion, has helped develop this plan together. And for that, I'm very thankful. Because this is, again, while this is a type of school district where nobody gets their way all of the time, I think that this process has led to a very good and appropriate result for our students. So I'm going to start by going through what we know as the current challenges that have precipitated this entire process. Namely, that our school start times does not match what the scientific studies are for our older students. That's been very well established. Some folks still have difficulty with that, but in general, I think we've mostly been convinced through our surveys and through our conversation that the start time for our older students needs to be later, more on the end time in a bit. In addition, there's a challenge that we've uncovered that our instructional hours per day for our current schools actually exceeds the maximum allowed in the regulations. So there's a challenge that exists with our current schedule in that we're actually over the limit for the number of instructional hours per day. Thus far, I've received an unbelievable amount of feedback, well over 100 emails from parents, from students, from teachers. It's probably closer to 300 now if I went back and counted. I've had a survey that I've received from Sauhegan students. There's been a survey that was summarized by Launchpad teachers at AMS. I've had a couple of faculty meetings, one recently. I had meetings today with all Sauhegan students in their advisory, although it was fairly short, and a parent information night last night. And what I've learned from that is I think I'm able to summarize our community's concerns and the values associated with our schools. And those things start with a high quality education. Our community expects that of us, to have a very high quality education. Our community does support, in large measure, older kids having a later start time, but they really want our older kids to be done by 3 p.m. And really not a minute later. If I'm representing our community's opinions well, and this is a part that's even changed as of today, that 3 p.m. cutoff is the absolute latest that our community as a whole expects our students to be in school. Our community expects there to be childcare considerations for our elementary students, meaning we need to think about it as a school system and how we can make childcare options for our elementary students feasible for their parents. Athletics and after-school activities are very important for all of our students, not just high school kids, not just middle, but elementary through every grade level. Athletics and after-school activities are very important to our community. The Sauhegan minimum 30-minute athletic-free activity window after school is very important at Sauhegan. For those who aren't familiar, there's a period of time, and it's a tradition at Sauhegan where athletics don't start until at least 30 minutes after the end of the school day. And that allows students who want to participate in things like community council or a club to not have to choose between athletics or that extracurricular activity. And that's a special thing for Sauhegan. Work options for high school students is important. Our community has many students who work after school, and they expect their students to be able to get to those jobs in a timely manner after school. And then our community expects our school year to start around Labor Day and not to go too late into June. Nobody wants school to be in session in June 20 anything. June 15th is about the latest our community, from what I've gathered, expects us to be in school. But in addition to our community, I've also learned from our educators some of their important priorities. I'm sorry, I just got a phone call from, okay. First, our educators also believe in a very high quality education as well. That's something that is common to our teachers and our community. But something that I've learned through this process is that our elementary educators feel very strongly about the 8 to 11 a.m. window as being the ideal learning time and the ideal learning window for our elementary students. For those of us that have had young kids, for the most part, there's obviously exceptions, and not every child falls into this category, but most young kids are up early, and by the afternoon, their efficacy for learning is diminished. And so that window is important. Teachers want minimal disruptions for athletics, meaning if they're teaching math as the last period of the day, every day of the week, and a student has to be dismissed for athletics multiple times, that really cuts into their math instruction. And so that's important to our teachers that we minimize those disruptions. In general, they prefer long blocks of instructional times, not short classes of 35 minutes or 45 minutes. They like long blocks of 80, 85, 90 minutes of time whenever possible. It's obviously important to our staff that we adhere to our collective bargaining agreements that have been negotiated and passed by our communities, and also that any change we make doesn't diminish our overall instructional hours for the year and water down the amount of time that we have with our students. Our regulations that are set in place as a part of our state government are important, and I wanted to take a minute to go through some of the key aspects of that, as our board is very familiar, but some of the community may not be. So those regulations in ED 306.18 spell out what bounds both our school year and our school days. So first, there's a minimum for students in grades K through 6 to have 945 hours of instructional time per year, and for students above grade 6 to have 990 hours per school year. So that's the maximum set forth by the standards. I'm sorry, the minimum set forth by the standards. But there's also a maximum, and that maximum is the number of instructional hours per day. And the cap is 5.75 hours, also known as 5 hours and 45 minutes for grades K to 6, and 6 hours per day for 7th through 12th grade students. In calculating instructional time, it's not the entire school day that's calculated. What's not included are things like lunch, passing time, or homeroom. But what is included is obviously class time, advisory for middle and high school students, and recess up to 30 minutes per day is counted as instructional time for students in grades K through 6. So that's where it's always great to start with those regulations, because it's pretty easy to see that as we add school days, that increases our number of hours for the year and make sure we hit our minimums. But as we lengthen a school day, it increases and gets us close to, if not over, the number of hours we can have in a given school day. And so our objectives through this process are first to get AMS and Sauhegan to have ideal start and end times of around 8:30 in the morning to start and getting out around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. That's been the fundamental thing that has started this entire process, that our secondary start times are not matching science and are not what's best for our students. We want our school year to remain within the community's expectations of starting around Labor Day and ending by June 15th. We want, if possible, to add outdoor and recess time for our elementary students. This has been discussed a lot at the board level and with our community, and we want to build that into this process. We don't want to add cost. There are several solutions that would make almost everybody in town have their ideal start and end times for students, but it would double our number of buses or nearly double our number of school buses. And so we know that we have to work within the constraints that we have and the current number of school buses that we have. The Sauhegan club time remains important. We don't want elementary kids at dark bus stops when at all possible. And if we do have elementary students at bus stops, we'd prefer it be in the morning when their parents are likely with them and not unexpectedly in the afternoon when they can't count on a bus arriving in the afternoon. But we want to absolutely minimize students being at dark bus stops. And then obviously preserve after school athletics, activity time for all students, work opportunities, etc. And so the options that we've explored over the last several years include what we colloquially refer to as a status quo, meaning we don't change anything. And frankly, I think that's off the table for us because given the number of people in our community that have become supportive of a later start time, I don't believe that the status quo is something that we can seriously consider or would be acceptable by our community. We've looked at the flip or the swap, where we flip elementary and secondary start and end times. We've looked at having a common start time, and this would be ideal in many ways, but this is what requires almost doubling our bus fleet if that were to happen. We've also looked at shifting everybody later, which was really the proposal that was on the table until just a few weeks ago. But that results in start times and end times that are very late for all of our students. So in short, our final proposal that I'm bringing forward to you as a school board is a Sauhegan school day that runs from 8 to 3, an AMS school day that runs from 8:30 to 3:15, and an elementary school day that runs from 7:45 to 2:15. And in order to counteract these slightly shorter school days, we would need to ensure that we have 175 school days in the calendar, which means right now where we don't make up the first 5 snow days that we make, in this proposal, we would absolutely need to have a minimum of 175 days. It would make up snow days at the end of the year. So some of the advantages, I want to be very clear about what I see are the advantages and the disadvantages with this proposal, because this is a compromise and an exercise in compromise. First, this really is the ideal start and end times for our older students and meets our #1 objective that was set forth by this entire process. It also preserves the ideal learning window for our younger students, and in general has the support of our elementary teachers for that reason. It does still preserve athletic work and activity time for all students. It is true that we've heard feedback that some students start jobs at 3 p.m. It is true that there are some students that have after-school activities that start as early as 3 p.m. And for those older students, this schedule doesn't work. But in general, for most students, it does. This does allow for extended after-school options for our elementary students, including extracurricular activities and options that have never previously been available, that we are able to consider and hopefully expand for our students. This doesn't require elementary parents to arrange childcare on both ends of the day. Our last proposal that was on the table really did. For many parents, they had to find childcare for both the morning and the afternoon, and that does seem unfair. This preserves our instructional hours for the most part, and it does fix our compliance with the existing regulations. So we now become in compliance with the regulations. It's likely in compliance with our existing collective bargaining agreements. I do think that our boards need to offer to have impact bargaining with each of our associations to make sure that we have their perspective and to examine whether there's an impact or not, but it's likely in compliance with our existing CBAs. To my knowledge, it adds no cost, doesn't add any buses or any other expense that we can foresee. We already budget 175 days for our buses. We already budget as if we're going to have 175 school days as it is, because right now that is possible. If we have no snow days, we would have 175 school days. This has minimal impact to summer and outside childcare. It does provide additional childcare for options for parents. Some parents have told us that our short school year makes it difficult to find childcare in the beginning of the summer because we're out a week or sometimes 2 weeks earlier than other surrounding school districts. And the outside childcare agencies haven't begun their summer schedules quite yet. It preserves activity time at Sauhegan and actually expands access due to a transportation shift, which I'm going to talk about in a few more minutes. And then it also builds in additional recess and movement breaks for our elementary kids, which is something that, again, has been a priority of late for us. And then it does provide support for our ESY and special programs. Those programs have to run even longer in the summer because of our extra long summer. And so this helps just a little bit with the length of those programs in the summer. Now, there are some disadvantages I want to be very clear about and make sure that folks on the board understand them. First, this does remove older kids as an option for younger kids in the afternoon, because elementary students get out first. They're not going to be having their older siblings available to watch them if that's an option for the family. Now, from our survey data, that does affect some families. It doesn't appear to affect a majority of families for sure. And frankly, I think that with our new schedule at Sauhegan that was adopted this past Monday, I think there are circumstances where if a family really needed that childcare option, where we could work with those families and allow that high school student to have the last period of day as a free period built into their schedule and preserve that childcare option for the younger child. So, but to be fair, this does make it so that elementary kids get out before secondary kids. It does shorten summer by up to a week. It doesn't on a schedule basis, but it does if we have snow days. And so that needs to be acknowledged. It changes how we handle snow days. Right now, it's sort of a unique situation where everyone is hoping for at least 5 snow days, but no more. Because if we don't have those 5 snow days, then it feels like we go to school for extra days or more days, or that teachers have to work extra days for free. It does kind of feel that way to folks. And if we have any more than that, we add them on at the end. So this does change how we handle snow days. And it is possible that some elementary students will have bus stops in darkness in the morning for parts of the school year. And I'm going to speak more about how we want to minimize that, but that is a reality that with bus stops on the schedule right now, starting as early as 6:30 in the morning in December and January, it's dark. It's 6:30 in our towns. And there is less after school time for AMS and Sauhegan students. Right now, when they get out at 2:30, they have an extra at least half an hour, if not 45 minutes of after school time for their activities, for work, et cetera, and we are removing that. It stands to reason that makes some sense because school's starting later and they're getting more sleep under this plan, but that is something that needs to be acknowledged as a disadvantage. So I want to walk through the schedules for the various buildings under this current iteration. For our elementary schools, this is what the daily schedule would look like with buses. Bus stops would start as early as 6:30 in the morning, and we're giving them a full hour to do their bus routes. I'm not convinced they need a full hour, but I'm being conservative right now, and I want to specify that it could take as long as an hour with our bus routes. Frankly, I think they need to be about 45 minutes at the most, because we're building in also time between when the bus routes end and when the school day starts of 15 minutes. So frankly, I think that when we go further down this pathway, we should be able to make a commitment to our community that bus stops start no earlier than 6:45. And if that's the case, then we won't have elementary students in darkness in the morning for bus stops. But to be fair, I think we need to be clear that it is possible right now that they would be. Bus routes end at 7:30 and the school day starts at 7:45, runs 6.5 hours and ends at 2:15. Bus routes would start at 2:30. And again, if we give them a full hour, they would run until 3:30. Again, I think that we don't need to count on it always being a full hour, but in fairness, it's really an hour and 15 minutes from the end of the school day till when we're saying those buses will be done with our bus routes. We're being very conservative here. For AMS, it would start at 7:35 with bus routes. Bus routes would end at 8:20 and the school day starts at 8:30. A week ago, our plan was for the AMS school day to end at 3 o'clock and to be the same with Sauhegan High School. Feedback from Dr. Bernasconi and the staff was that our schedule would benefit greatly by having an additional 15 minutes. And although 15 minutes doesn't seem like a lot, it seems to have quite an impact for the AMS students and for that schedule there. And so their school day would end at 3:15 and their bus routes would start at 3:30. This matches up with the bus routes ending from elementary at 3:30. Now, I think we need to look at maybe potentially 8:15 to 3 for the AMS, because again, our community's made it pretty clear that 3 really is the latest they want things to go for our secondary students. And so with time as we refine things, I'm going to make a commitment that if we can, we will change things to either 8:15 to 3 or do whatever we can to make it so we're not going past that 3 p.m., which appears to be a hard cutoff to our community. Bus routes for middle and high school would go 3:30 to 4:15. At Sauhegan, very similar schedule, except they get done at 3, and that built-in activity time for after-school activities would run from 3 to 3:30. In our current schedule, how we run things today, students who participate in that activity time are not able to take the buses home unless they wait for the late bus an hour to an hour and 15 minutes later. In this iteration and this plan, students who would be able to participate in activity time between 3 and 3:30 and then still catch the bus to get home. In addition, there'd be opportunities for students to meet with teachers during that time and get extra help before having to get on the bus. Now, again, if we can match up Sauhegan and AMS to end at 3, that will help families that have middle school students who ride home with their high school brothers and sisters, because in this iteration, for a high school student who's done at 3 and doesn't participate in an activity, they're going to want to leave and go home at 3 and not wait for their little brother and sister when they get out at 3:15. So again, there's another advantage to trying to match that up. And that's been some great feedback I've received even through today. So for buses, this is how the buses work. And again, it's important that our buses work together, because without this coordination of bus schedules, we need almost double the number of buses, and that's a non-starter. So bus routes for elementary, 6:30 to 7:30, start their secondary runs about 7:35 and take 45 minutes. Middle and high school kids have shorter bus routes on purpose because they have fewer stops and they also get on and off the bus a little quicker. So that's why there's a difference in time between elementary and secondary bus routes. In the afternoon, 2:30 to 3:30 elementary, and then secondary right at 3:30 to 4:15. Here's a breakdown of instructional hours between our existing and proposed. You can see in our existing schedule for elementary, it's about 10 minutes longer, and we have recess that's 25 minutes and lunch that's 25 minutes for 50 minutes total. And so if you note the total per day number of instructional hours in our existing, we're over by a full half an hour beyond what the regulations allow. And when you read those regulations, it's very strict actually by saying the number of instructional hours shall not exceed 5 hours and 5.75 hours is how the regulations write it. And so in our proposed and a 6.5 hour school day, we would extend recess time to a full 30 minutes. We would extend our lunchtime to a full 30 minutes, and we would add in at least 15 minutes for what we're calling a movement break. We're not calling it another recess because in some times of the year, it might be a movement break within the building. We're not going to fully get on snow pants and coats for a 15-minute movement break during the winter. But during this fall and the spring, we certainly would take advantage of additional outdoor time if we could. And so the total instructional hours per day for elementary in this iteration hits the full maximum, and we have 1,006 instructional hours per year, which very much exceeds the 945 hours as required in the regulations. For AMS, you can see again about a 10-minute shorter school day. Passing time is taken out of the instructional hours, and we still maintain what will be a 30-minute lunch. It should be noted for grades 5 and 6, because recess can count as instructional time. 5th and 6th graders only have a 25-minute lunch, and then are given a 20-minute recess in addition to that. And so the total amount of instructional time per day is just under the 6-hour maximum that's allowed by the regulations. It does fix where we're out of compliance in our current schedule, and it does maintain almost the exact same number of instructional hours for the school year. For Sauhegan, a similar breakdown where our school day is under the required maximum and well over the required minimum number of instructional hours. Our school year, I would suggest, ought to change just a bit to maintain the community's expectation around the school year. And for next year, and this is a non-COVID draft, so we're talking about a regular school year in the fall, which we're all hoping for. I'm going to suggest we start the 31st of August, which is the week before Labor Day. Have 3 days of school that week and have that Friday of Labor Day off, so that there's a 4-day weekend for Labor Day, and then a 4-day week the second week and a 5-day week the third week. This is a pretty popular schedule around the state, and it's helpful for students who've been off all summer to get back in the swing of things by having 3, then 4, then 5 school days. This still allows us to end on June 8th without any snow days, which is certainly acceptable. But if we build in 5 snow days and anticipate them in our calendar, which also is required by the regulations, the latest we would go would be June 15th for our school year. So with a slight adjustment, I think we're still within our community expectations. There's a to-do list still of some things that can only be adjusted as we get closer and with time. But I want to acknowledge those things that still need to be taken care of. Our elementary bus routes need to be shortened and tightened for 2 reasons. It will eliminate our elementary students in darkness at bus stops, but also will assist us getting to 3 p.m. for AMS. If we can shorten our elementary bus routes, it means our elementary bus routes will be done in time to have a 3:15 bus start in the afternoon as opposed to 3:30. And that helps what has been a community expectation for AMS's end time. That's become very apparent to me. I think we need to consider early and or late bus options and have further discussion about that. And what I mean by that is it could be with buses waiting until 3:30 to leave, that there might be a need at Sauhegan if students have the last period off, that instead of doing a late bus later than 3:30, that we have an early bus that leaves after the end of before the last period of the day. That allows for those students to get home for childcare or work options if they still have that requirement. And so that's something we need to work through and talk about as we get further down this pathway. I don't think it's something that stops us from making a decision, but it is a consideration. We need to execute on our after-school childcare options. We've had several conversations with our partners like the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club, and they're more than willing to provide access for our elementary students to support that for our students. I want to suggest that our school boards each reach out to their associations and offer to do impact bargaining as a result of these changes after adopted. Update our published school calendar for next year with the Labor Day, pre-Labor Day start. And then also as just a final thing is determine how we handle late starts moving forward. And there's some options on the table for that. So that's my presentation. I want to say that over the past number of years, we've gone through a pretty detailed process. I know that Ms. Beam is going to speak about that, but again, I'm really thankful to our board for having the patience with me to take all this time that I've needed to get to this point, and I'm really thankful to our community for voicing their opinions. I'm glad that we work in a school district where people feel empowered to share their opinions and they don't feel like they're cut out of the process, because that is the case in some other places, and I'm very proud that we don't live in that kind of school system. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Steele, for that very thorough presentation. I reached out to Ms. Beam a little bit earlier, asking that she just basically revisit the process that this particular board, the SAU 39 board, actually entertained the concept and idea a couple years back, and the process that we did to actually come to the point where 2 years ago, we asked our administration to actually change our school start times. So she's going to take a couple of minutes to explain it for our newer board members, and obviously the public, to just bring them back up to speed in terms of why we are where we are. Ms. Beam, the floor is yours.
I love how optimistic you are by that few minutes remark. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I've been asked to kind of tell you how we got here. And the discussion of school start times is not new. Longtime Amherst residents have joked, oh, you're talking about that again? Good luck, because multiple times we have tried, and as you've seen, it's a very complex, logistics heavy process that takes a whole lot of effort to get it right. And so it has not previously been successful. In 2017, a parent came to the Amherst School Board with her concerns over the school start times for our middle and elementary students. She brought with her research and strong recommendations from the CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics that middle and high school students benefit from starting their school day no sooner than 8:30 a.m. I would just like to stress, no sooner than 8:30 a.m. for our secondary students. In places where this change was made, students were more rested, less depressed, attendance was better, grades were higher, and new drivers had fewer accidents. The evidence was consistent and overwhelming, with benefits showing almost immediately. I offered to chair an exploratory committee looking into the merits, challenges, and options for changing our times. Our committee included representatives from all 3 districts. We also had previous board members who had worked unsuccessfully to change times several years prior, and the parent who asked us to consider a change now. We respected the work that had been done previously and learned from it. In addition, we spoke with parents, the Amherst Rec Department, the theater club at both the middle school and the high school, school principals, and SAU leadership. We received list of districts we play in sports from AMS and Sauhegan, and started speaking with the athletic directors. I spent a lot of time on Google Maps, figuring out how far we go for games. Ask me a town and I can tell you probably how long it takes to get there. I got really good at this game. And some of us became acutely aware of bus routing and schedules to other schools. I just cannot stress enough how much transportation factors into anything that we can do, any of our options. So in 2018, I presented my committee's findings and recommendations to the joint SAU boards in February. So it was February 2018. Our primary goal was to have middle and high school start at 8:30 per CDC and AAP recommendations and go from there. At that time, there was a strong response from school and administration. They did not want to change the length of our days, which provided some real challenges. However, we still felt that changing the start times would be a net positive for our students. So looking back at my notes for today, my committee actually suggested a 7:55 start time for elementary and 8:30 for AMS and Sohegan if we could find a way to turn buses around in less than 45 minutes. And it turns out we cannot turn them around in less than 45 minutes. But that was our goal. And the specific challenges, okay, wait, I'm sorry. So one bit of research that we highlighted at the time was that Dr. Richard Schwab of the University of Pennsylvania wrote, if school start times were based on sleep cycles, elementary schools would start at 7:30 a.m. and high schools at 8:30 or 8:45. It would increase their students' sleep time and likely improve their school performance. The specific challenges we highlighted and offered some recommendations around were buses. Ideally, we didn't want any children at a bus stop before 7 a.m. Or as close to 7 a.m. as possible. A lot of work has been done in the past 2 years to tighten up routes to support this eventual change, and there's still more work to do. Sports. We have a limited number of lighted fields and many groups looking to use the same spaces. Timing with other districts for games was discussed, and we looked into how other schools who had already changed were handling things. Sports, obviously, practices, everything to do with sports is a huge part of all of this. Neighboring districts. We researched and talked to districts who had already made changes and others who were considering it. The length of our day was unique and a special issue for us. Breakfast. Our work helped the pilot to try offering breakfast to our schools. Before and after school care. While an earlier start time from elementary would help many families avoid needing daycare before school and provide fewer transitions for those kids, we likely need to expand our options for aftercare and probably add an early morning option at the middle school. That's one thing that Adam did not mention, but since we have 5th and 6th graders who probably cannot put themselves on a bus in the morning comfortably, we will most likely have to add an option at the middle school, much like the one that's been at Clark Wilkins this year. So those are the bulk of the concerns that I've heard most recently as well. We tried to be very realistic and comprehensive, admitting that we didn't have solutions yet for every concern. So we considered, but didn't ultimately recommend keeping the current order, but pushing everything by about 30 minutes. It was too much trouble with not enough reward, and it would have put elementary starting at 9. Everyone starting at the same time would require more buses or being on the same buses. And that was something that the community did not have a tolerance for. And we also don't have campuses that are right next to each other. There's space between like Mount Vernon having to get all the way over, and even Clark Wilkins, there's space between them. You know, we just do not have one primary campus where everything is. And then flipping, just literally saying, okay, great, kids go at 7:25, and then, you know, that was too early for anybody. So a straight flip was also off the table. The SAU Joint Board voted unanimously to move forward and asked administration to come back with a proposal. So we believed that there was a way to do it. We believed we wanted to do it, but then we said, okay, go and come back with a plan. So once it turned over to administration, several polls and forums occurred. To minimize disruption, Superintendent Steele first proposal was keeping the current order, but just pushing everyone by 20 minutes in the 2018-19 school year. Does that sound familiar? Because that was one of the ones that my committee said probably not worth it. And it was quickly decided from overwhelming community feedback that our conclusion was shared and that there was too much churn without enough benefit, making things difficult for elementary parents and kids. So we went back to the drawing board. And in 2019, after we tabled the change for the 2018-19 school year, Superintendent Steele asked the athletic director at Sohegan to chair and convene a new committee that included board members, teachers, students, and administration. We met for nearly a year and brought new details to the SAU leadership, and additional polls were also conducted along the way. The SAU board heard a new proposal for the 2019-20 school year, but it was decided more work needed to be done, and we hadn't solved enough of the logistical challenges. We decided we couldn't do it yet if we couldn't do it right, but we committed to the idea and set a target of making this happen for the 2021-22 school year. So I think that's where I've definitely heard from a lot of people saying, wait, we haven't done this already. I thought it was this year. Is it this year? And this was where we've definitely been talking about it. We've come really close, but we decided we weren't ready and we didn't want to do it poorly. And so we pushed it out. So then a worldwide pandemic hit. Almost all attention rightfully turned to the task at hand of finding ways to support our school community under incredibly challenging circumstances. So one thing this year has proven is that we're resilient and we can make even challenging schedules work if needed. In the fall, the SAU heard an updated proposal from Superintendent Steele and tentatively approved with a deadline of this month, this meeting right now, to hear how this would work on a more granular level at each school. So that brings us to tonight. We are near a final vote. The urgency among families has obviously increased to be heard on how changes would affect them. The proposal has changed a few times as new feedback has been received and options discussed with administration, including lessons learned from this year. I hope reviewing the original list from my committee soothes some fears that there are major factors that simply hadn't been considered and planned around. Major work has been happening behind the scenes for more than 3 years. While several board members and administrators have changed, our strong belief that this is best for students has not wavered. Even before COVID and remote learning, our SAU set goals to focus on social emotional learning and support at all levels. I'm proud of the work that's been done and continues in our school community on this front. One of the major drivers for this change is to decrease depression among adolescents and increase their resiliency. None of us deal well when we are sleep deprived, and we are chronically shortchanging our adolescents by ignoring their natural circadian rhythms. The first class every day should not be a throwaway. No students might not get more sleep. The other thing is, well, they get up later, they're going to stay up later, and that's absolutely has been seen to happen, but it's where they're getting that sleep. And the sleep that serves them better is later in their cycle. They tend to go to sleep later, wake up later, and that's what their bodies are tuned to do. It's part of adolescence. So several community members have expressed a desire to get back to normal for at least a year before considering another major change. They're asking to table this once again. I counter that we are returning to a new normal. It's never going to be exactly like it was before COVID. And no matter what we choose, it's going to be a new normal. So some of our youngest learners have never experienced the old schedule or even in-person learning. Same for high school freshmen this year. My daughter is a freshman and I've seen a real positive difference from a later start for the freshmen. And many of the parents I know with peers in her grade have said the same. It would be far more disruptive to change back to our old pre-pandemic schedule and then change again a year later. If we truly believe this is the right thing to do, the most good for the greatest number of students, then we let them settle into it and start reaping the benefits as soon as possible, which is 2021 to 22 school year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Thank you for getting us up to speed and, to be honest with you, revisiting the past, because I think there's a lot of great work done by you and your team. And it's nice to actually bring that to the forefront once again as we formulate a final decision tonight. I'm going to open up the floor now to board members, and we're going to actually divide this part of the conversation into 2 pieces. The first piece, I would like to ask my fellow board members to raise their hand to ask questions of our superintendent about the particular proposal at hand. Once those questions are done, we're going to open up the floor for public comment. And once public comment is done, we are going to come back and then we're going to share our concerns, our thoughts, our vision, and our comments. And I'm going to give an opportunity for every board member to share their thoughts just from a transparency standpoint. And so you have the opportunity to get on the record with your views there. So this first part, guys, I just want to ask for questions only at this point. And we will start off with Ms. Kuzma. Ms. Kuzma, you have the floor.
So I have 2 quick questions. Should I ask them separately?
Yes, please. Just so we can keep it fair for everyone.
That's totally fine. So my first question is, have you looked into adding 2 more school days? So we'd be looking at a 177 school year, day school year, that would help us close the gap and bring us closer to our current educational hours. Adam.
No, so we've not looked at that. We're from what I understand of the change about 5 years ago or so to the 175 day school calendar is that people don't want 180. So we're trying to stay away from 180. And I understand what you're saying is a compromise in the middle of that. But frankly, we, for our elementary schools and our middle school, actually, with our current schedule that's on the table, we're well over our instructional hours already. And although we're not at where we're at today, I think it's a good balance. So I would not be in favor of extending the year even by a couple of days and eating into summer even that much more, because based on the community feedback I've received so far, it seems like an appropriate compromise. But that's my opinion.
Ms. Grant.
The thing I hear about club time, so I appreciate the 30-minute thought about that. Currently, the time is like 45 minutes or so for club time, and realistically, school ends at 3. If the bus leaves at 3:30, those kids are really meeting for 20 minutes. Jazz band concern, math team concern, things like that. Do we have plans to solve those issues?
Yeah, so the activities certainly can meet for longer than that period of time, but kids would have to start getting to athletics by that point. So sports really can't start after 3:30 because we run out of daylight, and that's really a limiting factor for them. So if we're going to end at 3, we've really got till 3:30 no matter when we get out of school for that activity time. So students that have to take the bus have got to leave at 3:30. Students that are going to start athletics have to do that at 3:30. And so that's a limitation. It's absolutely a compromise in this move. And I would say that it's 15 minutes away from activity time to solve the late start issue. That's how I see it.
Great, thank you. Ms. Gruger.
Thank you. I just want to say kudos to all of the people who have been working on this for so long, and watching the ebb and flow of the comments and the support and the lack of support has been daunting. I don't know how you keep everybody happy, and I think you really don't. But I think this plan looks as good as it can if we're really going to take this on. I have a couple of questions, Adam. One, I guess, would refer to this immediate year. So are we currently in our COVID year with our time, are we over instructional hours every day now, or is that just looking at next year?
In previous years, we were over.
Okay.
With our COVID calendars and COVID schedules, I'm just not sure. I've not even considered the math this current year, but if we were to return to our status quo, we would be outside the bounds of the regulations.
Okay, great. And then I would.
And Ellen, we're gonna come back for the second question here. We're just gonna turn it over to Laura first. Laura, go ahead.
Adam, can you give your reasoning for changing your position from your communication on February 5th to parents to your communication yesterday, February 17th to parents?
Which position is that, Ms. Taylor?
Well, one, the high school would be first, and then the elementary would be after. And number 2, you were committed to not having AMS get out after 3. You had several priorities, and then those priorities have now changed last night.
Well, that's not true. But what has changed is our proposal that was on the table a couple of weeks ago, where elementary went after middle and high school, was not appropriate for our elementary students based on the feedback from the parents that I've spoken to and our educators. Our educators met with me and shared with me their belief about the core prime window for students to be in school, which is from 8 to 11 in general, and they made the case for me. And so we create more issues with elementary being after the secondary. Our elementary students would absolutely be at dark bus stops most of the year because they'd be going as late as 5 p.m. with their bus routes. And frankly, we weren't sure we could make the bus routes even work with the schedule that we had on the table. So that had to change based on what I think was educationally appropriate and for logistics perspective. I did change my position on the AMS length of school day and added 15 minutes to it. What I presented to parents last night was having that 15 minutes on the end of the day. And as I've heard the feedback, that is where, again, I think 3 p.m. remains a hard stop and a very firm issue for our community. I think we need to consider that being in the morning, if at all possible. Again, only if we can change our elementary bus stops to be a little bit more efficient. But to address that criticism that my positions have changed, I hope it's understood that we were making this decision and developing this plan as a community. And if we're doing that as a community, then things have to change, because otherwise it's just Adam trying to convince people of his plan. And that's never how I want to lead the school district.
Thank you. Mr. Conkle.
Yep, just a question for clarity's sake, Adam. When Stephanie's talking about the community or the clubs, there would still be a late bus if there's students who are, in a longer club or at school longer. Is that correct?
I think so. That's the thing I think we need to have further conversation about, is how we stagger do we have an early bus schedule and a late bus schedule, or how does that work? So right now, with the club time built into the schedule, I think that we would want to have potentially an early bus. But if we move up to 3:15, then that really does change the bus opportunities for our students, and that would have an impact. So if AMS was able to be done at 3 o'clock as well, it's very likely that our buses for both AMS and Sauhegan would roll at 3:15. So we've now eliminated bus transportation for those students who want to participate in a club, in which case we absolutely have to have a late bus for those students. So again, it's all interrelated, it's all interconnected, but that's those are kind of the options, and that's why I think that needs further that fine point needs further discussion.
Great, thank you. Ms. Facey.
Yeah, along those same lines, I don't want to put you on the spot, Adam, but how likely do you think you can make that change where AMS would end at 3 and we would potentially change the buses perhaps to an early bus and a late bus?
So I think we need to do our best to make it happen, because it's again, the feedback is strong from our parents and from our teachers that 3:15 is too late. And so I want to be responsive to that. From our administrators and even the teacher leadership team at AMS, they fought strongly for that extra 15 minutes in the day. And so somehow we've got to find a way to give on that point, either by going in the morning, having that 15 minutes in the morning, but that all hinges on our elementary bus routes becoming more efficient. And I can't promise that without having that work done with the bus company.
Great, thank you. Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, has there been consideration given to the students who drive at Sauhegan and allowing the cars to leave before the buses? I know that in years past, students get stuck in the parking lot behind the buses, and if the buses are running, between 3:15 and 3:30, then you're delaying an awful lot of students who might have the opportunity to get out. And I know I've heard from some parents that that's a concern. Has that been addressed, or will that be?
So in this iteration, the students who drive would leave first. And so that gets them out of the parking lot and off to their after school activities. And if you think about it, it actually shortens the change from the current to the proposed. Because right now, most students are held until the buses leave, which can be as long as 15 minutes after the end of the school day. And so most students are stuck behind the buses. And so this would actually shorten to about 15 minutes of change from the current practice to the proposed. Great question.
Thank you. Before we move to second questions, Mr. Glover, you had your hand raised. Are you all set now? Okay. Ms. Shield, just a quick question from the Mount Vernon side. So can you just talk real fast about the possibilities for after school programming or opportunities at the Mount Vernon Village School with sort of the earlier end of the school day?
Indeed. So something that the Mount Vernon board spoke about last week at their meeting as being a high priority for them was the opportunity to expand even our school-based offerings for after-school activities, which would certainly be possible with the earlier end time. Less likely to have been possible if we were getting out at 3:45 in the afternoon. So that becomes now something that can very clearly become a priority for us in designing those activities. And for those parents who would take advantage of those, that would be something that would also bridge the gap until a high school student was able to be home or to pick up that child. So that's one thing. In addition to specific childcare, we've already had conversations with the childcare provider in the Amherst School District, and they are available and willing to expand their offering to the Mount Vernon Village School. It's all about capacity. They need to be able to have it be work for the financially for them, so they can't do it for 3 or 4 students. But if there's an appropriate need, they've already talked about being willing to do that. So that's something that we would support and hope that we could implement. In addition to Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, and I can't think of the third, that provide, some already provide direct transportation after school from the Mount Vernon Village School, but we would want to work with them to expand that, because we think that with the earlier end time, there will definitely be more demand from parents. Does that answer your question?
It does. Ms. Beam.
I think the one you couldn't think of is Hampshire Hills. That's my guess. Not that I've looked into any of this. So my question is, I'm not entirely sure how to phrase it. I ended by saying that we're trying to do the most good for the greatest number of students. And I feel like the plan very much, and we have some flexibility built in with the new schedule at the high school that's going to help with some of our upperclassmen and some of their needs. For parents like the one that spoke tonight and said, hey, I have a special needs child, and so I have some special needs around this. Are we committing, and I mean, I do think I know the answer, but are we committing to working with families, as needed? We can't promise to make it perfect for everybody, but we really will do our best effort to say, okay, where's your pain point and how can we help with that pain point? Like, we tried to do it on a broader base where we can, but then we will individually work with families and try to find something that can work. Is that our commitment that we're making?
I can make that commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Glover.
Yeah, I thought the question I wanted to ask was answered, but then I thought more about it, maybe not quite. So when you mentioned about maybe recapturing the 15 minutes extra for AMS and to make it an 8:15, is that what I heard correct? And to 3? But so does that, I mean, the high schoolers and the middle schoolers all ride the bus together. So now you have 2 adjoining schools starting at different times. So that seems to be a wrinkle. How does that problem get solved?
Yeah, it means that high school students who ride the bus would have to arrive 15 minutes earlier. So they would have extra time to transition to start their school day. But you're right, every single one of these decisions has an impact. It's like one of Newton's laws, I think.
Yeah, right. And I guess just, sorry, Mr. O'Keefe, just to say that backing that up on the back end defeats the purpose of having the later start time in the first instance. So it's kind of where my mind is thinking about that.
Thank you, John. Mr. Goffier.
Yeah, so I don't have I don't have a lot of questions necessarily, Adam. I do have a question, but my first point here is that I know why we got here. When we talked in November, I think it was, we voted on a plan and then we said, let's approve it in February pending answers to these questions. I see a lot more questions that are brought up here and a lot more uncertainty, mainly around the transportation side of things. So that's where my concern lies in this plan. And again, I understand how we got here, but my overall, I guess my question is, do you have an option for, if you have a student in Clark Wilkins that needs a brother or sister to take care of them when they get home? You mentioned an early bus for the Sauhegan kid or the AMS kid to get home, but what happens to that Clark Wilkins kid for the 45 minutes, either if they don't have an early bus or if those buses don't line up perfectly? Is there a late bus for Clark Wilkins that can get home after a Sauhegan kid does? Because not all the Sauhegan kids drive. Not all these caregivers for their younger siblings are going to be drivers. They're going to have to rely on bus transportation. And it may be an 8th grader that's running on the AMS schedule that can't get out 45 minutes early. And then how do those buses overlap without increasing the number of buses that you need? So I see a lot of problems there. And I guess, sorry, it's not a question, it's more of a point of interest, but that's one of my transportation concerns.
Well, allow me to retort. So this bus schedule we brought forward, we can deliver on. So we know when I say that there's questions about bus transportation, it's about the finer points of how we refine things to make it even better. But we have an hour and 15 minutes built in from the start of the elementary bus routes to when school starts. We absolutely are able to do that. We have an hour and 15 minutes in the afternoon built in from when the school day ends and when the buses have to be back to AMS and Sauhegan. And that's, there's a wide margin of time in there. So that's, I think I'm being very conservative with the times. And that's why I'm saying with further work, we can sharpen it and get it better and solve some of the unknown questions right now. So I'm trying to be very clear that we're not going to promise something we can't deliver and then come back later and say, oh, we said 45 minutes, but there's some bus routes that are 55 minutes. So that's why we're presenting it that way, but I'm very confident in the schedule we have now. I was less confident in the one where we had elementary after our middle and high school because those margins were very tight.
Great, thank you. Ms. Grund.
So one little point of clarification, the one thing Josh brought up, the 30 minutes that I was talking about, which really almost comes down to 20. My concern is also that the kids who have athletic practice will not be able to really participate in clubs fully, or clubs would have to change, but that's something that could be worked out. One question for you, Adam. You did a quick survey with advisories at the high school today. Do you know what the results of that was? Or have them?
I don't have them handy with me right now. And Mike is not on here with us. Actually, he is. So Mike, would you want to share those survey results? I'm putting him on the spot right now, big time.
Yeah, I can. I have the results, and I think it was about 70% of the student body was not in favor of the 8 to 3 o'clock start time. But I think the reason being it shifted was when the buses were going to roll a little bit later, at 3:30, and there's a little bit unknown for the student population at this time, and because of the kind of like the last 36 hours of things. But I'm confident that we can make that time useful, and I've been thinking a little bit about the clubs and talking to some different people about it. So, but I'm not as concerned, but I think the kids like the 8:30, but they like the option of leaving campus closer to 3, and I think many will, and we just got to work out the details on that. And so that was the data today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Ellen. Ms. Grigin.
Thank you. I think it's important to remember that for the working parents in the afternoon who are relying on bus transportation to get their caregivers to their home, truth that there will be a delay, but it may not be as significant if we can roll those buses a little earlier. An example is, when I was working, my 4th grader, we started practicing, he came home, he was here for 20 minutes before I got home. Certainly a different consideration if you have a 1st grader, but remember, hopefully your freshman in high school will be driving in a year or half, and it may only be a year that you have to use New Morning for your 1st grader. So there are solutions, and I want to suggest that the topic around working families continues to spin. And I would almost suggest that we form a little group of families who have these challenges and speak with them as a group and come up with some solutions. We are not going to be able to work at everybody's schedule, whether you're a nurse and you leave at 6 o'clock in the morning, or you work from home and you need the kids out of your hair at 8. So, but I'm going to suggest, and Adam, I'll follow up with you because I'd probably volunteer maybe to lead that. So we can just get some more constructive ideas about what works for the working family in our community for elementary schools, and the sacrifices they might need to make, but where we can help here and there. And Steve's going to be really mad at me, but I'd like to see that 15-minute movement break get added on to the 30 minutes of outside time. So we have 45. That's it.
Thanks, Ellen. Mr. Torres for his first question.
Yeah, just a real quick question for Adam. Do you know of any districts that actually made this change and actually went back? Are you aware of any, any anecdotal evidence where they committed to making this change and after a period of time they said, this didn't really wasn't all that we had thought or envisioned at some point, and actually went back to the old schedule?
In my research, which has not been extensive, but I've not heard of one school district that has changed back. Like I've not heard of one school district that has made their start times any earlier for secondary kids, especially after moving them later. It might be out there, and so I don't want to state that unequivocally no one's ever done it, but in my research, I've not heard of that.
Thank you, Adam.
So I believe Ms. Kuzma has a potential answer on that one, George, if I may. Beth?
Sorry, apparently that spacebar function that my kids keep swearing by doesn't work. Anyway, Terry and I both actually served on the committee over the summer with the former athletic director at the high school.
Yes, athletic director.
Yeah. And we actually, as a committee, reached out to several different schools that have already made this change. And all of the ones that we spoke with said, although it was a really hard change, and it might not be perfect, they don't want to switch back, and they would never want to switch back to the way it was.
And we asked that specific question. We were pretty pointed and said, no, be honest.
Yeah, very pointed. So.
Thank you, Beth. Laura.
Adam and Mike, I was wondering what options. I was similar to Sarah's question, the congestion of the driving students. A lot of them are going to be waiting for AMS students to get out. How they'll be able to get out of the parking lot. Right now, they're all with the buses. I mean, it's not unsurmountable. There's another exit, but that might require an additional police officer. I don't know what options you've considered.
Yeah, what we've considered is we're pretty sure that we can manage it with our existing resources. And we think getting the drivers that are not waiting for middle school students off the campus before the buses even roll. And then during that 15-minute window between when AMS gets out and the buses leave, even more of those students can move on. So we think it's pretty manageable and not insurmountable, as you mentioned.
Thank you. Ms. Kuzma.
So Adam, you hinted really quickly about taking a look at the early release, the late start schedule that we currently have right now. Is the idea of switching them to early releases kind of on the table?
I think there's three options that exist. One is to maintain the current late start process that we have right now. Those are required by one of our collective bargaining agreements that we have in place. Another option would be early releases, as you mentioned, but a third and probably even a preferred option for some of us would be to trade in those late start, that amount of professional development time, and have separate professional development days for our teaching staff. We have fairly limited numbers of days for that PD time. It would probably happen some in the summer, and it wouldn't extend the school year to have those days, but that's an option that would also extend our instructional time as well. That's something we'd have to bargain and work out, but those are the three options.
Great. So two last questions, one for Mr. Eckhoff and next Ms. Facey. So Mr. Eckhoff, you're next.
I don't have a question, Steve, but it's more comment. Should I wait for the comment section or?
Yeah, so we're going to comment right after the public has the opportunity to share their thoughts, and then everyone's going to have the opportunity to be on the record with some concerns, thoughts, and comments.
I'll retract then. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Ms. Facey, were you all set? I know she just.
Yeah, my question was answered. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, seeing no other further comments from the board, I feel it's appropriate with such an important topic to entertain our residents and get their feedback on the presentation. And after listening to the board's questions, to solicit that type of feedback. Once that's done, we are going to re-engage my fellow colleagues on the board to share our thoughts and then go on the record with a vote. So first, we're going to start off with, I believe, Ms. Beatty. Ms. Beatty, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and town in which you reside.
Yes, my name is Allison Beatty. I live at 12 Joshua Road in Amherst. So I just wanted to comment stating that some of the things that I've read and heard from my fellow residents is that the kids need to be in longer. I would say, based on Mr. Steele's report, that that's the plan by having them start in August, a few days earlier. Also, by as an educator, I can tell you that extending any further into June, the kids are checked out, and that is not productive learning time. They are not learning anything new. Also, I love that this plan still allows the kids to get out at a typical time in June. It meets the needs of all the learners for the best times of the day that they are good, that they are best able to learn. I do like being in compliance. Again, as a former educator, I recognize that out of compliance is not a place you want to be. And I think this new calendar more closely matches other calendars within the state, both starting before Labor Day and getting out in the middle of, as late as the middle of June. So I am in support of the proposed changes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Dion, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and town of residence. Go ahead, Ms. Dion. Ms. Dion, you're on mute. If you want to hit unmute. Ms. Dion, unmute yourself, and then you would have the floor for 3 minutes. And as a reminder to members of the community, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise your hand feature. And once we call on you, you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. Ms. Dion, last call, if you can hit unmute. All right, Ms. Dion, once you get that figured out, just raise your hand again and we'll go ahead and we'll allow you the opportunity to address the board. Ms. Watkins, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and the town in which you reside.
Jenny Watkins, 17 Eastern Ave. I just want to talk to you a little. First of all, thank you for all the research that's been done. This is a very passionate discussion by our community, and I appreciate the time that you're taking to listen to all of this. I wanted to add a little bit of information for the research that I've done in this particular topic. One of the board members asked if there was research done for schools that have potentially reversed this. And there is an article in the Journal of Educational Psychology. It's titled Early School Start Times and the Risk Factors for Poor Performance. And it's specifically talking about elementary students. And the conclusion in that particular article states that our findings indicate that early school start times may be just as detrimental for young children as they are for adolescents. I would also like to share that the American Sleep Association also states that early school start times may curtail children's sleep and inadvertently promote sleep restriction. The current study for this has potential implications for early school start times for behavioral problems in public elementary schools. Most of the recommendations from the CDC all the way through schoolstarttime.org do not recommend school start times anytime for any age group between 8 and 8:30. So again, I don't want to underestimate the logistical challenges that this problem holds. And as we saw in the earlier presentation, a bus call time of 6:30 will have detrimental sleep impacts for our elementary students, assuming that at least an hour to get ready in the morning. So just as much as a challenge as it is for our adolescents, I truly feel that the proposal is transferring the problem to our younger children and may have even more significant detrimental impacts to these students as they continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watkins. Ms. Dion, let's go ahead and give you another opportunity to address the board.
Hi there. This actually is Kim Wybrany. I'm not sure why it's saying Deb Dion. So this is Kim Wybrany. I am at 81 Amherst Street in Amherst. Is this okay if I proceed with the wrong
Sure,
name?
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I am coming to you as a parent of a middle schooler and 2 high schoolers. I'm a lifelong resident of Amherst. I love this town, the families, the students, and the schools. I'm really pleased with the way that our board and superintendent have garnered the feedback from the community around this potential change in our school start times. Very comfortable with the day beginning at 8:30 and ending at 3. In the last couple of days, this has been changed for AMS to be 3:15 with buses leaving at 3:30. I would really like the board to consider a 3 p.m. ending time for both Sauhegan and AMS. First of all, curious of the quality of learning that will happen for middle school students after that 3 p.m. mark. And will that last 15 minutes be the best use of their time? Next, I heard Adam state that there is some time built in for clubs and activities at Sauhegan during that 30 minutes. As I was thinking about it, and I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I have concerns that those Sauhegan students who do not engage in any of those activities will have a 30-minute unstructured time as they wait for the bus, in which various issues will inevitably arise. I work with this age group and can attest with almost certainty that unstructured time for students would be setting the school and students up for some potential issues and concerns. I also feel that for those families who have students at both AMS and Sauhegan, it will cause some logistical difficulties for those that need to pick up their students or rely on student drivers in order to get to other after school activities that they may not be home in time for if they take the bus. I'm wondering if this would cause any more traffic issues, having to wait for one student to be dismissed from the same campus. This further iterates that the bus is leaving at 3:30, those students will still be getting home quite late. The consideration of an early bus, although that's an interesting thought, I feel it seems chaotic and seems like a little like too many moving parts, not only for the school, but also for families. And I'm wondering if kids would be missing instructional time if they had to take an early bus. So a late bus to me feels more reasonable. I respectfully urge the board to consider the original proposal, which had AMS and Sauhegan ending at the same time at 3 p.m. with buses moving at around 3:15. I think the benefits for our students having to navigate.
Ms. Wybrany, you have a 15-minute extension.
Yep, I think the benefits of our students having to navigate after school transportation, our families, coordinating end of day needs, and keeping things overall much cleaner, streamlined, more organized, outweigh the 15 minutes that would be gained. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to share their comments and concerns? Remind you to use your raise your hand feature on the Zoom interface. Ms. Chrisman. Ms. Chrisman, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and the town in which you reside.
Hello, my name is Emma Chrisman. I'm an 8th grader at Amherst Middle School, and I love that I'm a student coming at this webinar. And I would just love to say that not only do I feel like this time change would not help us whatsoever, because of that 15 minutes at the end, I don't feel like that educationally we would be benefiting from that, because coming from my perspective of attending AMS presently in our schedule, we have something called directed study that's right between our first core and our lunch. And basically it's a time where we could either work on schoolwork like homework or websites. Now that time frame, teachers basically tell us to be quiet, and we don't do anything. Honestly, like, I'm going to be 100% honest, I'll throw the kids under the bus. Some kids don't actually end up working during that, so that extra 15 minutes, if we change our schedule, would not help. And going back to that Sauhegan survey, 70% of kids did not want to change that. I think you should listen to the kids, because the kids are the ones actually doing this, not the adults. And adults are constantly telling us that we should become part of society, because that is very important. So I feel like you should seriously consider, before doing this time change, how this is going to affect the kids. Now, I understand that the sleeping is a great factor and you want to decrease depression rates, but I don't feel like actually changing our time is actually going to benefit us, because we still have kids that are depressed. Like, changing times is not going to affect that. And I feel that instead of a bunch of adults making this decision for us, I cannot stress enough the fact that the students need to be heard more. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chrisman. It's always awesome to hear our students share their thoughts at these public forums. It takes a lot of guts to do what you did, and kudos to you, and great job. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Miss Shepherd, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and town in which you reside.
Annie Shepherd, 13 Fairway Drive in Amherst. I actually have, I don't have a lot of new to say, but I do actually have something to share on behalf of my freshman. She could not be here, so she sent me a text with, she wanted to share her concerns. So I'm just gonna go ahead and read that. Her name is Hannah. She says, from what I've heard in my class, from my class, is that we like the 8:30 to 3 schedule and pretty much agree with it. But we are concerned about the buses. If we don't get out on time and we drive with a sibling or drive ourselves, then we get blocked in for half an hour. We want to know if there is any way they could put space between the buses where the cars from the parking lot go out. Even my teacher was saying if there are teachers who teach an 8th period class and they don't make it out on time, they will be blocked for a period of time. We were wondering if there was a way to work out something so that student drivers and teachers could use the road behind the theater. That once upon a time was actually one of the exits. So that was her point. And I just wanted to reiterate the concern about AMS getting out at 3:15. And I know that's going to be relooked at. I have a current 7th grader as well as my freshman and a junior. And my 7th grader will need to be dismissed at 3 o'clock to ride home with her siblings, regardless of whether or not she gets out at 3 or 3:15. So I'm just wondering if that concern has been taken into consideration, which obviously it has, but I guess wanted to reiterate that as a concern. I do appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this and trying to please as many people as possible. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Shepherd. All right, seeing no other comments from the public, let's go ahead and move back to our discussion with this proposed start time changes. What I would like to do is I would like to afford everyone the opportunity to speak at this time. And I'm going to go down in the same order that in which we do roll call, starting with Ms. Kuzma. You have the floor to present your ideas, comments, concerns, and then we'll move on to Tom.
I was just going to say, we just had another parent raise her hand at the last second. Did you want to take that, or?
I did not see that. Do you know who it was?
I figured. It was Shauna Lapoli.
Ms. Lapoli, if you wanted to still add a comment, we'll afford you that opportunity now. Just use your raise your hand feature and we'll go ahead and we'll enable you. All right, Ms. Lapoli, you have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and town in which you reside.
Hello, my name is Tyler Lapoli. I am a 6th grader and I live on New South Drive in Amherst. And I would like to share that I personally believe that this change in the start time and end time will be good for students, because students will be able to wake up later and be able to sleep in a little bit. Because I go in person and I wake up really early, and then I get stressed about waking up early because I know I have to wake up early and then get ready. And then it makes me more stressed, and then I wake up earlier, like at 2 a.m. sometimes, just because I'm stressed about waking up early. And I'm going remote now because I can't handle the waking up so early, and I really like in person, but I'm going remote.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Lapoli. Same to you. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. It takes a lot of guts to get in front of a bunch of people on Zoom and know that there's probably close to 1,000 people going to see this. So thank you very much for your time, and awesome job to the concept of sharing your thoughts. Let's go back to Ms. Kuzma. Ms. Kuzma, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and share your concerns, thoughts, questions, and then we'll move on to Mr. Goffier.
So I actually have a remote child in the middle school, so she's able to get an hour at least of extra sleep every night. I have noticed a significant difference in her as a student, getting her up and moving in the morning. She's able to get up, be ready to go, and function within 20 minutes or less. It's been a significant difference. Her academics and everything has been a huge, we've seen a huge benefit for it. We've been talking about this for years. I think we have done everything that we can to compromise and come to as much of a middle ground as we can, trying to keep keep all sides into consideration, being able to use more of the morning time with elementary school students when they are most active learners, speaking with elementary school teachers in the afternoon, the kids check out, they're done. Speaking with them, it's around 1:30ish. It becomes very hard to engage them as learners. So being able to shorten that day down to 2:15 is a huge benefit. Yeah, I really think that at this point, we've done a lot of work, we've done a lot of research, and we've come to the best common ground as we can. I do agree, trying to figure out a way to shorten the bus routes in the morning. I think it's probably pretty possible. Especially, I've taken a lot of time working with the bus routes in the past. I think that there is some more work that can be done, especially with some structure and some rules that need to be done. We just need to do that. And I was supposed to really make a motion because we were supposed to make a motion to open discussions, weren't we? So I'll make the motion to open the discussion.
Thank you.
Sorry. So anyway, I'll make the motion to open the discussion. Already made that statement if anybody wants to make a second, but I am done with my point, I think.
So you're going to make a motion to adopt the proposed school start time changes by the superintendent, Steele, as presented.
Correct.
Great. Do I hear a second? Ms. Beam seconds. And now we'll open that up for discussion. Ms. Kuzma, I'm assuming your comments that you just made are applicable to the motion at hand.
Yes, thanks.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Goffier.
So I still have my concerns with transportation, and I'm very, I am almost moved to make a motion to anything that we do tonight, make it temporary until our next meeting to see if some of these solutions can be solved regarding the transportation and then regarding early start times, the number of days that we go. So I don't know if that's something that can be determined by March, but my other thoughts are, I think we need to scrap snow days and go to fully remote days. I don't see any reason why we can't do what we're doing this week right now, where Adam has given teachers advance notice that we may have snow days to have something ready to go. I don't think that from December through early March, it's too much of an ask to have teachers to have a remote day in the can, something they have to update every couple of weeks. In this way, these kids don't have to worry about extending the year into further into June if we end up getting a snow day. I also think that we need to get rid of early start times. If we're concerned about that 8 to 11 window for elementary students, it seems counterproductive to me to have 2 hours of what's considered educational time go towards these early start, or these late start times, excuse me, late starts. I think they need to be moved to professional development days, the year extended to 177 days to account for, in calendar development days for teachers. But I think that we're missing out on that 8 to 11 window if that's our prime focus on the elementary side. But again, I am hesitant to approve anything 100% tonight until we can see some of these transportation plans, the middle school start time become finalized, other than a conditional approval tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Beam?
So I know it's no secret where I fall on this issue, but I would just like to remind everyone, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. There is so much good that can be had, and it's going to be, I mean, even just getting to consensus has been a wee bit chaotic, and making sure that all voices are heard. But I very much appreciate, I've heard some frustrated parents use terms like, oh, it's a bait and switch. You gave us one plan and now it's another. And it's like, no, it has been in process because we've continued to listen. We've continued to work together. And I think that there's no reason to believe we won't continue to work together and try to make it as beneficial as possible for everyone. And I agree with Adam that knowing a little bit, like I said, I know far more about buses than I ever wanted to. And I do believe that there are absolutely things that we can do and tighten that up. I applaud you for being on the conservative side just to make sure you didn't have to backtrack, but I feel pretty confident that that can indeed be tightened up. And especially when we have more specific goals in mind, like here's what we are specifically trying to do, and maybe look at our longest routes and say, can we break that up in any way to make that less painful? So I really would urge all of us that if you are feeling that you are mostly in support, I would say let's go forward and understand that conversations are still happening and that details, we're still going to be, even as we go, are going to continue to be finalized. But I think that we can at least agree to the overall plan. And that is my hope tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Grugin. You're good?
Nope. Yeah, did I have my hand up?
No. I'm just giving everyone the opportunity to.
Oh, you're so
state
good.
their
No,
thoughts.
I'm not going to take any of your time.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Conklin.
So first of all, I want to say I'm fully in support of this plan and think we should move it forward tonight. I would say that if I were king of the SAU, I might present a slightly different plan, but I think luckily for our district, we have a kinder and more benevolent king in Mr. Steele, who has been listening to our community on this for the past several years, and I think has done some great work. It's my view that the starting bell has been sounding on this for the last few years, and we've remained in the starting blocks in order to refine and iterate the process and achieve the best plan for the most students. And I believe we're as close as that as we can be before starting the race. So I'm certain there are more hurdles ahead, some that we can't even see until we start this race. But I am very confident in our administration and this board to remain nimble and flexible moving forward. And I think it's very important that we take this first step tonight and get started on this race.
Great, thank you. Mr. Gronstra.
Thank you. So funny, been on the board long enough to have been part of every iteration of these new school start and end times than I care to think about. And I've been all over the map on it during that process as well. When it first was suggested, I was a huge proponent of it. I thought there was really some huge benefits. And I've heard a lot of convincing, I guess arguments is maybe a strong word, but arguments from folks, families, parents, of why not to put it in. But the more I think about it, the more I think this is really a good, workable solution. I did do my own survey of 4 relatively recent graduates of the school system, whose last name will go without saying. And of those, that survey, 75% of them actually were in favor of this change. And that's keeping sports in mind. Now, granted, they weren't also in multiple clubs and other things, but with the sports and even some after school jobs, like I said, 3/4 were in favor. I do also, like, by the way, I just want to reiterate that I like the early bus option. Obviously, as a parent mentioned, she would be concerned, how is that going to work? I would imagine that would be part of the flexibility built within that student's schedule to allow that last period to be an open period where they could certainly have that option to take that bus if needed. And the last thing I just want to mention is because I do think this is probably the best spot from a overall, majority of the folks kids is going to work for. I would really like to make sure that we make a commitment to get the AMS and the high school synced up and ending their school days at the same time. I think that's a huge thing. And we need to commit ourselves to do what we can to drive towards that goal. That's it for me.
Thank you. Ms. Facey.
Thank you. So I have to say that in my 9+ years on the board, this issue has given me the most challenge in listening to community, parents, teachers, fellow board members, administration. This has been a personal challenge and a board member challenge. As board members, it's really critical that we put aside our own personal family situations and look for the greater good of all of our students in SAU 39. So I had to do that in this case as a parent of former high school students who were quite comfortable and successful with the previous schedule. So this was something that I needed to set aside. I also really valued the club time that was within the schedule at Sauhegan that allowed students to not be pigeonholed as either an athlete or someone on a particular club, such as math team or jazz or a whole variety of other activities. So that's something that I greatly value at Sauhegan. I think it's different than most other high schools. All of that being said, I believe that this schedule is really a great compromise that provides the best good for the most students and families and educators in our community. And while it's not perfect, I think we have really hit the mark on most of the concerns. I think ending the school day for secondary at 3 o'clock, I would agree with Pam. I would like to see that some more work done in that regard, and syncing the start time as well, because I think I agree. I don't think that it works well if you have the day starting at different times and ending at the same time. So I don't know how that compromise could happen from an educational standpoint. I understand that those are concerns of building leaders and others, but I think that I would like to challenge the administration to take a look at that. I think there's some work to be done on the busing, but I don't think those are insurmountable issues. I think that the club time at the high school, yes, it's not perfect, but I do think there's some work that can be done to solve that. Clubs can meet multiple times during the day. We now have virtual opportunities. So I don't think those are obstacles that should set us back either. So this has been a tough one for me, but I do believe that this is a really solid plan with some work to be done, but I would, nothing that I see as work being done would stop me from making a decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Facey. Mr. Coughlin.
Thank you. I've been quiet so far, so I'm going to say a lot now. I have 4 things to say. First of all, I'll go back to Adam's presentation, back to 6:30 this evening, where I am blown away by Ed 30618 because I've been doing policy for 18 years, and I can't believe in all that time and all the administrators we've had in the SAU, no one's ever noticed the upper limit before. It's just mind-blowing to me that I didn't see it. Shame on me, but no one else saw it either, so I don't feel so bad. And oh my God, shame on the state for saying, please don't educate our students too much. That is annoying me. So that rant is over. I just want to remind my fellow board members who probably know this or will 2 words into my explanation, but also for the benefit of the attendees, the 36 attendees we see out there. This board doesn't have the power to make the decision tonight. Only the 3 individual boards voting in their own meetings can make this happen, and only if they all agree. So the vote tonight is a signal from each of the boards to each of the other boards saying, we think we're going to do this, or we think we're not. If the vote is 16, not 16, there are what, 17 board members, one's missing, so there's 16 board members. So the vote is 13-3 in favor of this, but the 3 no votes all are on the Amherst School Board, this thing goes down because the Amherst School Board won't implement it and it's over. So 3 Amherst members voting no, 3 Mount Vernon members voting no, or 4 Sauhegan members voting no, say this doesn't happen because we all 3 boards have to agree to make it happen. So I just want to explain to the public in particular the significance of the vote that's going to happen tonight. It's really just us all flashing to each other how we're going to vote in the future, and makes no commitment, except, you know, as I said, if 3 Amherst board members say no, it's dead in the water. We're finished. Just picking Amherst as an example, because they killed it the last time this happened. Which gets to, I support this. I supported it in 2007, the first time when the Amherst board killed it, and none of you were here, so I don't blame any of you personally. I support it now. It's the right thing to do. And the issue here is, I go back to chemistry, which is it's an activation energy problem. We have to get a lot of pain in the system really fast to make this change, and then it'll all settle out again. If there are, let's say, 8% of the families in our 2 towns are inconvenienced by the current schedule, when we go to a new one, 8% will be inconvenienced by the new one. Roughly speaking, it'll all wash out. Different people will be in pain, but the amount of pain will probably be the same. The only problem is that the transition time is going to inconvenience 50% of the families in town. So it's the transition that is the problem. So I'll say something I just computed on the back of an envelope here, which is if back in 2007, when this was first rejected, if instead the board then had said, let's just change all the times 5 minutes in the direction we want, and had kept doing that, no 1 year would have been a painful transition. We would be where we want to be today. And no one would have been, no large crowd of people would have been inconvenienced by any one of those transitions. And I think we would all be happier now. So if this fails tonight, I'm going to push for a 5-minute change next year in the right direction in all the boards. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Coughlin. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Steve. Although this product seems to have improved through the process, I think there are also some benefits in the new schedule. I appreciate the creative ways some of the problems have been solved. This afternoon, the board members received over 100 pages or almost 100 pages of comments from parents that I have not had sufficient time to read. And I feel I owe it to the parents who wrote to consider their thoughts as well. I think considering the plan changed from February 5th to February 17th, and now there's a new plan, a new iteration, I think we need to provide more time for feedback from that iteration. And the dismissal, I feel that the dismissal between AMS and Sohegan should be aligned and should be no later than 3, and the buses should be shortly after, and then a late bus. The thought of the congestion and the danger of high school drivers with middle school and high school students, that does not sit well. It does not seem like the right decision to make. But I do appreciate all of the creativity in the process, and I think we're a lot farther than we have been. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Torres.
Thank you. So I'll make this short and sweet. I will show all the other board members my cards, and I am in support of this plan. No one's going to walk away happy with everything about this. There's going to be, yes, I would like to see AMS sync up with the high school. That would be preferable, but if that can't happen, I still will be in support of it. There's always going to be something that I think we're going to walk away that I wish we could have done better, but I think at the end, this is a solid plan and I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Ms. Grant.
So I've spent, quite a bit of time thinking about this, working it out, talking to lots of people, and I appreciate exactly what's come out of this. The 8:30 start time, definitely supported. The 3 p.m. I really appreciate the high school. I think that works, it's a good compromise for everybody. So that's great to hear. I would like to see us work on the 3:15 AMS. It sounds like that's a big concern for many families. So I would really like to see maybe we hold off on a vote until March and just see if we can get that 3:15 worked out, because if we approve this tonight, then it still has to goes to each board, but it also says that we support the 3:15. And right now I'm not sure I support the 3:15 based on the feedback. The one thing I've been hearing a lot of over the past week is the mental health going on in our schools. Our students, our staff, our teachers are mentally exhausted. They're in change fatigue mode. And this is a huge change. I'm not, like I said, I don't think, my gut says is people aren't really against it. It's just that right now processing through it is a lot for them. So again, if we give until a March timeframe to just get through the 3:15 change, the transportation issues, let people think about this for another week or two. I think we're going to have more support, but right now there's a major change fatigue going on in the schools. So those are my concerns. I really would like to hold off to March to hear about the 3:15 change. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Glover.
Yeah, well, I'm very pleased with the presentation tonight. I was in support of this when this same board in 2019, when I was a member of the Amherst School Board, was on the precipice of adopting it 2 years ago. And it was the Sohegan board, Steve, at that time that put the brakes on because of the high school concerns for athletics and club time and after school jobs and all of that. It was supposed to be delayed a year, but now it was delayed 2 years because of COVID. So here we are again. I, at that time and still today, think that ripping the Band-Aid off is the right leadership move, and that in about 2 to 6 months, no one will even remember what the old start times were. And like Terry said, we can start reaping the benefits. To some of the board members who have concerns about maybe trying to take a pause and thinking this through a little bit more or letting it soak in, I don't see any problem delaying a decision for a month and tabling this motion until then. We have a week break next week. Maybe people who are feeling the change fatigue or whatever that is might have some time to digest this. I mean, let's remember, there were several iterations of this plan, loosely distributed in the community and through various forums, but it was really only yesterday when Adam presented to parents in the community, and tonight, as he presented it to us, that we really saw it for the first time. So I'm not opposed to delaying. I don't think the delay in any way is going to change my support. I don't think that really puts this in jeopardy in terms of ironing out details and working out transportation. Parents will still have plenty of notice to sort out the daycare needs. I mean, this isn't going to be implemented until August, so that's many, many months away. So if that is an accommodation to make for people to comment and get comfortable with this, then I'm okay with that. I'd just like to take a little bit of time to, first I want to say, why am I so in support of this? Well, when the research is compelling, the clinical research is compelling, the anecdotal information from school districts, including those in our state, like in Portsmouth, the reports have been glowing with happier students, better academic performance, better performance on tests, and decreased truancy. This is all good, and this is all stuff that we could benefit. So this is why I'm so eager to get it started. Regarding the 15 minutes, I understand from Adam's presentation, especially last night, was that 15 minutes isn't just the 15 minutes on the end of the day. That 15 minutes is incorporated throughout the day to avoid rolling back important times of learning, like intervention time and the middle school advisory time. So that 15 minutes isn't just an extra at the end of the day. It's more minutes in a lot of the other programs that are very, very important, and sacrificing those programs would be truly detrimental. So I think at the other end of the spectrum, if you back up earlier than 8:30, then you defeat the whole purpose of making this shift in the first place. So I am solid on the 8:30 to 3 and the 8:30 to 3:15 for those reasons. One of the comments from the public was about this unrestricted time. I think that we already have that now. I mean, certain students who are going to take advantage of the time, or they're going to blow that time off, isn't going to be any different if we make a start time change. I appreciate listening to the kids. I really do, but this is not an issue where the children are in a position to decide, because they don't know what they don't know. And it's really important that we as adult leaders who are looking out the best interests of these children, listen to the science and make the changes appropriately, and believe and trust in them that they will make the transition as smoothly as they're able. And with that, one other thing as a counterpoint to some of the things that I've heard. I like some of the things Tom said about scrapping the late start days. Well, and Adam, I think too, in lieu of professional development days. I'm not sure that we can scrap snow days for remote, because as much as I'd like to, I don't know how well capable we will be to just at a snap of a finger switch to remote learning, especially from a technology perspective, because right now a lot of computers are assigned to children that would otherwise be at the school, and I don't know that that's a logistic hurdle that could be solved. Maybe it could be solved, and if it could, I'd be in well support of that. And all the other details, I have creative thoughts about them. I don't have to go through that whole laundry list here, but those challenges, I'm excited to discuss them and find solutions at our respective boards. So I'm in support. Steve, I couldn't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate all of the hard work that's gone into this proposal. I appreciate all of the back work that was done by the committees, our current committee and the committees over the last many years, as we've learned. I am in support of these changes. I do want to say though that that if we're going to look at the science, we need to look at all of the science and not pick and choose what we're willing to investigate and what we're willing to acknowledge as scientific data. And we did hear from at least one community member this evening that there is some data to show that our younger students may not, in fact, benefit from such an early time. I don't think that we can pick and choose, what is scientifically appropriate or valid. So I would like to see some investigation put forward into that early start time for the younger kids. I think we owe it to the younger learners to do that because, as was stated, we don't want to replace one problem with another. That does concern me. So if we're going to look at the science, we need to look at the science and acknowledge it across the board. That said, as I mentioned, I am in support. I appreciate the creative solutions that have been put forth, and I look forward to seeing where this goes. I would ask that the board retain the right to evaluate this again in a year so that we can assess how this is working for our students. I'd like the opportunity for the boards to be able to review changes in test data. I would like the students to be asked again to evaluate how it goes for them. I'd like the staff to be asked the same thing. Basically, I just want us to build in a checkpoint so that we can see how this is working for people or if it's not, and reserve the right to reassess at that time, just because it feels as though we need a checkpoint. So that's my thought, but I am overall in support. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Mr. Eckhoff.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks to the board. I've been an outlier on this. I think I voted no about 5 or 6 months ago when it was first taken up for a vote with the SAU board. I voted no a week ago on the Mount Vernon vote, and I was total transparent. I have not done a lot of research, investigative research on this. I will be upfront. I'm going to change my vote tonight to a yes in support of the motion. I think first and foremost, I have 100% confidence in Adam and his team on this. I also have 100% confidence in the efforts of the multitude of committee members that have broached this subject over the last, 10, 12 years, and the fact that they feel that the science is there. I do echo Sarah's comments just previous about concerns about testing and what is the benchmark going to be. I'm not sure 1 year is enough. I think we probably, if we're going to dive into this, it's going to be 2 years. I will say my biggest concern with this is that if this was the absolute home run, you got to do this, everybody jump in the pool solution to educational resolve for our teenage children, then I think why isn't there something from the New Hampshire Department of Education or a national Department of Education as, hey, this is the way you need to go? So I know the science is there. I have listened to everybody's comments, but I'm an outlier. And I want to be wrong. And I said this during the Mount Vernon School Board meeting a week and a half ago. I hope I'm wrong. I still have my concerns about a lot of the logistics that are involved with this, from a family, transportation, everything, but there's been a ton of work done here, ton of work from a lot smarter people than I am. So tonight I changed my vote in regards to the Mount Vernon school and also to the SAU school. If we're going to do this, we got to jump in now. We can't wait any longer. People need to make plans. They need to make arrangements with their families, and we need to be all in. So I have no skin in the game here. I've got no kids in the district. I have nothing that's going to impact me from a personal impact. Again, my concern is what is best for the students. All of them. My vote is yes. We need to measure it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. St. Dennis.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks for that setup, Mr. Eckhoff. I have nothing new to add about this that hasn't already been stated. However, I do want to say this is what is best for students. And I want to say thank you to any student that is out there watching, any student that may be watching on demand in the future from now, and especially to those students that texted in and got on their microphones to talk tonight. Irregardless of what the conversation is in the end and what the outcome may be, it's more important than ever to have our student voice empowered and to have students that feel like they belong in this district, their voices are heard in this district, and that they can make a change in this district. Without them in here, what are we doing? And I think that it is more important today than ever before that our students feel comfortable and confident to be able to step up, speak their minds in a thorough, opinionated manner, and allow themselves to be heard across our board. So thank you to any of them that are watching or may watch in the future, and those that are thinking and or have already stated their opinions.
Great, thank you, sir. And one of the luxuries of going last is I get to say the word echo a lot. If you remember back in the day when Ms. Facey was chairwoman, she said, please don't repeat what everyone said, just say echo and let's move on. And I'm going to do the same with just one additional caveat. So when this process actually started multiple years ago, I was skeptical. I was extremely skeptical. I didn't see the benefit. I went to school in Milford, graduated from Milford Area Senior High School, and we started at 7:29 each day, got out at 2:10. It was fine for me. I woke up early, got up before 6 o'clock to catch a bus to get in. It was fine. But recognizing that things have changed today, school is completely different from where it was back when I went to school in Milford, and it wasn't too long ago. And recognizing that and trying to adopt and address the significant needs and issues of adolescents in 2021 needs to be something at the forefront of all of our thoughts and minds as we make decisions tonight. I am fully in support of this, but I also want to echo my fellow Mount Vernon board members that this is something that is going to have profound benefits, but we want to make sure that the logistics get worked out and the logistics are transparent to the community. The community is informed along the way, and more importantly, that there are check-ins over the course of the next couple of months. I don't believe in delaying tonight's vote any longer. I think just hearing everyone's comments and thoughts, I think everyone for the most part is in support of this. And I believe that we should be moving this to our individual boards for final approval. Parents need to know what's going on in September. We heard thoughts and concerns from community members about changes and too much change going on. I don't want to throw another change into the mix of, yeah, we may or may not change our school times. We're going to delay this conversation until May. We need to make the decision now, make the decision at our next board meetings coming up in March, and let's move forward. Let's move on to our strategic plan. Let's move on to our strategic vision for our district and make it a better place for everyone, our staff, our employees, our students, and our communities. With that said, Mr. Steele wanted to make a quick comment.
I did. Thank you,
Mr. Chair, and to all of our board members. Again, just this group of school board members, 17 strong, coming from 17 different perspectives. It's really hard to make something like this, and the fact that we're doing this all together, again, is very encouraging to me as superintendent. So I wanted to show the board what 3 o'clock would look like if the AMS end time was moved to 3 p.m. And we came prepared to share that this evening. So I highlighted in green in this deck all of the changes that are affected by the 3 p.m. Being the end time for AMS. Obviously the end time. I'm going to skip past the advantages because we've been over them, and disadvantages as well. The AMS daily schedule ending at 3 would be in a 6.5 hour day like all of the other schools, and bus routes would start right at 3:15 and hopefully be done at 4. The bus schedule itself leaves only 45 minutes for elementary bus runs. And I want to be crystal clear that we are not able to commit ourselves to having those bus routes done by 3:15. I don't believe we could have AMS start at 8:15. As I look at it, that would mean that if we had AMS start at 8:15 in the morning, that the elementary bus routes in the best case scenario would be 6:30 to 7:15 and a 7:30 start time for the elementary schools. That's in the best case scenario. A more likely scenario that we've committed to tonight would be that they start at 6:15 in the morning, which is just a non-starter for our elementary kids. So if AMS moves to 8 to 3, 6.5 hour day, their instructional hours, we would only have a 25-minute lunch. We would not be able to have a 30-minute lunch because that's 5 of the 15 minutes we would need to take back right there. And even with that change, if we had a 30-minute lunch, first of all, we wouldn't hit our required hours for the year. So it's not even possible to have a 30-minute lunch and admit our minimum instructional hours for the year. So at the 25-minute lunch, we're at 1,003 hours, which is about 30 less than what we would have had with the 15-minute longer school day. So very possible. But in making that change, which I think we need to strongly consider this evening to resolve the issues from our community, 4 things that we need to accept or commit to as a school board and administration. One is that we're accepting less instructional hours for our middle school. The second is that we're committing to shortening our bus stops at the elementary runs to make sure we can do the 45 minutes. And when I tell you that I'm asking for that commitment, that means there will be unhappy parents when we shorten our elementary bus routes, because the way that happens is by eliminating stops that we don't need and making some families walk a little bit further to have more efficient bus routes. And so you need to know that as a school board that you would be committing to that alongside of me. Third, we would need to commit that we would continue our late buses that we have in place right now, because that would mean we would absolutely have to have those so that students could participate in activities and clubs at both AMS and Sauhegan and have a late bus that's available for them. That's a pretty easy one. And then finally, we need to accept the 25-minute lunch for AMS. So if the board is comfortable with those 4 things, I'm comfortable tonight changing our schedule back to 8:30 to 3 for AMS and being done with all of the logistical issues that were identified previously this evening. So I wanted to offer that, Mr. Chair, as a way to hear from the community and the school board's concerns about all of these issues.
Great. So I thought we were landing the plane here. There's a lot there, and to be honest with you, some concerning thoughts on my part, but I'll go last. Anyone want to speak first? Ellen.
Yeah, Adam, again, thanks for being so flexible and, one step ahead of us. I'd suggest instead of taking the 5 minutes off lunch, take 1 minute off every period.
Well, Ellen, remember that lunch does not count as instructional time. So that gets taken off the day. And when we take it off the day, that means we don't hit our minimum hours for the year, even with a full 175-day school year. So lunch has to get shorter. Has to.
Stephanie?
So thank you for being prepared for this. I think that's this is helpful. The less instructional hours, I mean, I think if it come from Bethany of what she would take off, that's the scary part, because I'm a proponent of put the kids in class. They need to be in front of teachers. That's important. The shortened runs for elementary routes, that's another scary part, right? I think it's important for many parents to hear that is what would happen. I don't know. My gut says there'd be a lot of negative feedback on that. And if that is the only way to make it happen, that's to me is almost a non-starter, and you're back to the 315, because that's concern. But I'd like to hear from parents potentially on that. Those are the two pieces for me. I want kids in class. I'm a big proponent of that. And those elementary runs, yeah.
Well, and I want to answer your question, Stephanie. So the 4 places where the 15 minutes would likely come from, lunch I've already identified has to come from there. The other 3 options are Launchpad, Eagle, and specials. It's one of those 3 things, because we're not going to take time out of the core classes. We're not going to do that. And so the only 3 options we have left: Eagle, Launchpad, specials.
Yeah, and you can't take it out of specials. That's not cool either, because that's your computer class. That's your art class.
There's no good answer. And this is why Dr. Bernasconi advocated for
Then
those
you're
15.
back at 315.
So you've now experienced my thought process over this last week.
And needed to hear that. So thank you.
Ms. Spacey?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I appreciate that insight. I would still be a proponent of 8:30 to 3, based on all of the community feedback, and we have to give somewhere. And I think I truly value the additional programs of Launchpad and Eagle. However, perhaps there's some efficiencies that we can gain and make the 8:30 to 3 happen.
Mr. Goff here.
I think that this is a second move. While this does affect some of the AMS additional, Eagle or Launchpad or something like that, this is a second time where we're putting the bulk of this move in the back of our elementary students and parents by shortening bus routes, removing bus stops. So if there are parents concerned that moving these kids earlier to get the high school kids and AMS kids later, that can be perceived as, we put the bulk of this move on those parents and kids. And now this is a second one because we're shortening their bus routes, shortening their conveniences to accommodate a 15-minute window at the end of the AMS day. So just my thought on it.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin.
So ultimately, I'm in support of either. I think the original plan, and for Tom's points, I would support more. But I think ultimately we need clarity tonight. We need to move forward. So there are maybe some creative thoughts, and maybe that needs to come back to Bethany and ASB, or needs to hear about it. But I think we can move forward. My opinion is that we should move forward either way. But I'm most comfortable with the original plan.
Mr. Glover.
Yeah, I mean, this is 15 minutes. Okay, let's just remember, it's not a lot of time. And then it eases a lot of burdens to keep it. Number one, like to Tom's and others' points, it makes it calm when you're transitioning elementary students on and off of buses. That's a good thing for them, to feel safe, to feel like they're not rushing and running out into the road. This is calm for middle school students who benefit from Eagle, Launchpad, and their specials.
The original plan and for...
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Mr. Glover.
Okay. This preserves that the high school, the 30 minutes, which isn't also not a lot of time, but at least it's something before the buses roll at 3:30. I mean, this, what's as presented, solves a lot of the challenges we faced previously. And I do not support changing the AMS to 3 o'clock and having buses roll at 3:15 for all of those reasons.
Thank you. Ms. Kuzma.
So I just want to, I don't think that we should necessarily blow up all the hard work that's in the current plan and things like that with some of these statements. I think that there's, removing 5 minutes from lunch, and then, if worse comes to worse, removing 5 minutes from lunch and taking a look, and even if we shorten the elementary bus routes so that we can get a turnaround time and get middle school started even 5 minutes earlier or 10 minutes earlier to make up, even if it's just 10 minutes instead of the full 15 type of a thing. I think we get some progress there. I think we get a huge amount of progress there. I don't think it has to be an all or nothing situation. I think that there's still some manipulation and some baby steps that we can make to get there, but I don't think that it should prevent us from moving forward.
Great, thank you. Ms. Beam?
So again, not that I'm a bus expert, but I can say that it was pointed out to me that bus stops and group bus stops are actually safer. They're easier for cars to see because you have a group of kids instead of just one. They are more efficient in a lot of ways. There are fewer stops. There's a lot to be said for them. And so I don't feel like it is actually saying, oh, we're going to put a burden on our elementary kids because they have a bus stop instead of dropping closer to their house. I think that there are actually some valid safety things in favor of bus stops rather than individual stops. So I would just like to throw that out there. And second, if we didn't have an opportunity for kids to get help in multiple ways, to get to one-on-one support, to have support after school and a late bus available, and other ways to get help if they need it, then I'd say, no, you can't touch, Eagle time, and you can't do that, but we do have other opportunities. So if we had to compromise a little bit, I believe that compromise could possibly be made in a way that I could be comfortable with, that it's not that the opportunity is never there. And I think that we go back to the administration and we let the administration, they are the experts on this, and this falls under my district. We are 3 districts and 1 in purpose, but this one falls under mine, and I'm willing to go and work with them and do the best that we can to get that to sync up. And so I'm comfortable with what we would have to do to make that happen, if that's what it takes to make this successful.
Ms. Grugin?
I'm going to agree that a rushed bus 45-minute, hoping that it all works out and then finding out in June that it won't, could blow up in our faces. I just want to say, I think we're overthinking this a little bit. I think we're picking apart a solution to find another solution that maybe doesn't exist. I'm going to say the 315 might be what we need to live with. Everybody's making some sort of change. I just think we're overthinking 15 minutes. And I will say this, 5 minutes at lunch didn't seem like a big deal until we added it on at the elementary school, and then everybody thought it was the best thing that ever happened. That time might not be instructional time, but it is mental health time, and it is important. And we all know how important it is. Leaving a class 1 minute early, and if you have to negotiate that somewhere in the day, is not going to make as big an impact, in my opinion. And if we get rid of early or late start, don't we make up a couple of hours everywhere?
Great, thank you, Ellen. Mr. Conklin.
So I'm going to just echo Terry at the beginning of all this to say I think we're making the perfect the enemy of the good here. And I think we're taking a deep dive into probably what's been going on in Adam's brain over the last few weeks. And I think I would like to just call the vote and move forward as soon as we can, because I think that ultimately parents need clarity. And I think we can keep talking about this for hours, but there might be adjustments and there might be refinements. And I trust this administration and this board and this community to work to make those moving forward.
Great. The vote's been called. I'll just add my 2 cents real fast. Changing that 15 minutes doesn't seem like it's a lot, but it's pretty impactful to my community. If we go ahead and we actually adjust and create a type bus schedule, we're talking right now from the original proposal, Mount Vernon buses, I think is being very optimistic about them starting at those hours. It's going to have to be earlier. You know, last year my bus was pulling up in front of my house at 6:02 in the morning. My kids were up at 5:15 to get to the high school at 7:30. So to say that we're going to be able to do that, it's going to be very challenging for my community. You can't have buses in groups, or I'm sorry, bus stops in groups, because houses are a quarter mile, a mile and a half away from each other. So parents going to be driving to another kid's house to drop off their kid. It's just not feasible. 15 minutes, that 15-minute assignment assigned to the middle school, you're going to be taking away from club time because now the buses are going to be rolling up sooner and kids are not going to want to stay after school for that extracurricular at the high school. So I think from a compromise standpoint, the version that we're looking at tonight from a vote standpoint, this is going to be the best that we are going to provide for the 21-22 calendar year. I say we give it a shot. I say we test it. Like Mr. Eckhoff had said, over the course of 2 years, come back and revisit it and make minor tweaks and adjustments. To go ahead and try to work out a calendar or a schedule tonight in a work session is not only unrealistic, it's unfair to our administrators, to our community, and to each other. We pay Mr. Steele and his team to come up with these ideas. The recommendation that's being proposed by him, I'm taking as his best idea, and I'm supporting it as written. That's it. That's all I got to say. So with the vote been called, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote to support the motion by Ms. Kuzma.
Kuzma,
Ms. Kuzma, go ahead.
Kuzma, yes.
Mr. Gothier.
Gothier, no.
Ms. Beam.
Beam, yes.
Ms. Grugin.
Grugin, yes.
Mr. Conklin.
Conklin, yes.
Mr. Gronstra.
Gronstra, yes.
Ms. Facey.
Facey, yes.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yes.
Ms. Taylor.
Taylor, no.
Mr. Torres.
Torres, yes.
Ms. Grund.
Grund, yes.
Mr. Glover.
Glover, yes.
Ms. Lawrence.
Lawrence, yes.
Mr. Eckhoff. Mr. Eckhoff. Thumbs up for yes, thumbs down for no. Great. Mr. Eckhoff, yes. Mr. St. Dennis.
St. Dennis, yes.
Great. O'Keefe, yes. So out of the 16 attendance, I'm sorry, 16 attendance tonight, Ms. Hinckley is not present with 2 no votes. The motion passes. We're going to open it up for discussion with Mr. Steele with regards to our COVID calendar. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a while back when we discussed our school calendar for next year, I also brought forward what was meant to be a little bit of a, what's the right word? I've lost the word, but I wanted to bring forward something that prepared our school board and community for the fact that next year might be a disrupted school year as well because of COVID-19. I want to preface my comments by saying it's way too early to know for sure. But all of the data right now suggests that one of 2 things is likely as we go through the next 6 months or so. That the second wave of COVID-19 cases tails off and that we enter a relatively low amount of cases and positivity rate for the next several months. The other is that there is a third wave that comes somewhere between March and May or thereafter of unknown strength and unknown characteristics. And so we need to begin the discussion about preparing for if we have a significant wave of COVID cases that affects our next school year. I say that knowing full well that no one wants to think this way at all about next school year. Everyone hopes that next school year returns to near normal. But I need to suggest to you as our board that next year will not be 100% normal for 2 reasons. Number one, while all of our staff who want to be vaccinated likely will have had the chance to be vaccinated by the start of next school year, none of our students will be. Virtually none of our students. Possible, some that are over 16 will be, but none of our younger students will be vaccinated. And so there will at least some number of families that are looking for something different than the traditional school year. And the second factor is simply the unknown, that we don't know what our community will expect of us for the next school year. And so we need to be prepared for that. The calendar I put forward several months ago was a potential COVID calendar, which is included in your packet, has several things in it that are very different from our current school year calendar. First is that we would start in mid-August. Second is that we would build in a week-long break in October around Columbus Day. And third, that we would have a significant remote only portion where our school is closed after the holidays as a result of holiday travel. Since then, we've learned a number of things, and this evening I'm bringing forward to you what I'm going to suggest as a different COVID calendar for us to consider. And so I'd like to share that with you this evening. This calendar has several changes from the first that was included in your packet. First, it shows us starting on August 23rd as opposed to August 11th. So much closer towards where we would normally start. Second, this does preserve a week-long break in October. And the reason for this is, in my experience, in a normal school year, the length of time from the start of the school year till November at Thanksgiving is one of the hardest stretches of the year for our faculty and students. And getting to Thanksgiving is very difficult. This current school year that we're in was exacerbated by all of our COVID-19 situation tenfold. And just getting us to Thanksgiving was very difficult. And so I'm going to suggest that we take a week in October to span that gap and make sure we all get to Thanksgiving well. The next change is that instead of having school closed for 2 weeks in January between Christmas and Martin Luther King Day, instead building in remote only days after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, after February, and after April. And so a week-long remote only period for all of our students. We don't know if that's going to be necessary, right? There's no way for us to know whether that's going to be necessary. And so that part of the decision tree doesn't have to be made now. It could be published and included as what our plans are for right now, but we can always take away remote days as we get closer. What's more difficult for families is when we add an unexpected remote only situation for them, where they then have to plan for childcare. So it's better, in my opinion, to plan for these structured remote only weeks following vacation weeks. We also don't know how the travel guidance will change and be adjusted. But in general, this updated calendar starts us a week and a day earlier from the proposed calendar I discussed earlier today. It adds that week-long break in October after Columbus Day, and it builds in remote only weeks after all of our vacations. One other significant change from this calendar, which I'm going to suggest no matter what we do for next year, the state has changed their recommended February vacation. So February vacation from the state recommended calendar was originally the 21st through the 25th. 2 weeks ago, the state changed their recommended February vacation calendar to February 28th through March 4th. And this makes sure that we're not having the same February vacation as Massachusetts, which apparently nobody wants to ski with people from Massachusetts. So that's all of our surrounding school districts have adopted this update to their calendar as well for February vacation. And so although I'm not bringing it forward officially tonight, I wanted to highlight it for our board this evening as well. So Mr. Chairman and board, I wanted to bring this forward for discussion. I'm still not looking for the board to adopt this as a COVID calendar for next year. We still have our proposed school calendar that we've already adopted. But I thought the discussion about if we need to have another disrupted school year next year, I wanted to have a discussion about what the calendar ought to look like. Because if we're going to be starting even that extra back to August 23rd, we need to at least warn families that if COVID is going to disrupt our next school year, we need to be warning them now to prepare for that so that travel and plans over the summer are not impacted by this change. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Eckhoff.
Thanks, Stephen. And Adam, I just was questioning it. Does it make any sense to move the October week break up a week to the 1st through the 15th and then, because right now it's a 6-week gap and then only a 3-week gap between the break and Thanksgiving. So I guess my question would, to make it more equal, would it make sense to be off the first week of October versus the second?
That's fine with me. That I have no preference about that.
Mr. Gothier.
Sorry, my picture disappeared and I couldn't take it off mute. I think that I have a very hard time with this for a lot of the reasons that why I was such an ardent supporter of getting back in schools in September, because the science has not supported keeping schools remote or closed or whatever. And I know this is not closing it, so I get that. I don't see why we really have to be a whole lot different than this year. But my biggest concern is while you may be giving parents notice that we have remote weeks in there, that's potentially, I think I counted 11 weeks of in-school vacation that parents have to take between Thanksgiving, Christmas, or the holiday break, February, April, and then 4 weeks of remote learning. And then an October week, some parents don't have the means to be able to send their kids to a day camp. Some people don't have the ability to work from home. I think that's a huge burden to put on parents, to have them be forced to figure out what they're going to do for upwards of 10 weeks of school time, where they're going to be impacted in the labor force. And I know that if this has to go into play, jobs are probably going to be more work from home, but that's not a convenience that everybody has. So I have a major problem with this schedule, and I have a major problem deviating from what we did this year, knowing that teachers are likely going to have been vaccinated, and knowing that kids are not the ones that spread this disease. But again, that's scientific part of it. We don't have to get into tonight, but that's just my thought on this original look.
Thank you. Ms. Grugin.
I'm going to agree with Tom. I'd also like to point out that if you offer an October break, you certainly are going to need a remote week after it. That is prime travel time when no one else would be away. So you bet much parents going to hit Disney that week. So I just don't think, listen, I'm an educator. I work with kids every day. I understand the stresses of teachers, but I am going to remind everybody that this isn't something we've ever had to do in the past. And if we're struggling with this mental health in our schools, we need to look at other sources of that mental health. COVID's been, overwhelming for many of us. We all have our lane, but this is getting a little ridiculous. So if we keep offering up a break from mental health, without actually discussing what the issue is, I think we're going to have bigger fish to fry here. I completely don't agree with this. I think October, we're all in school. I understand that all the kids will be back. And Tom, your point that kids aren't sharing it, kids aren't getting it, right? So that's the real point here. But when we are all back in school, which is our primary reason that teachers should be inoculated, the CDC recommends all kids go back to school, but forgetting that we can't socially distance them if they're all back in school. That becomes a bit of an issue. We may have more cases in kids, and then we're spreading it. But yeah, hopefully we're all vaccinated. But again, I cannot support that October break. For working families, you look at the purple on this map, this is a parent's nightmare.
Thank you. Mr. Glover.
I want to echo Alan's would need a week of remote after the October. It's obvious. I mean, look, this is not an ideal calendar. I don't think Adam wants to do this calendar. I don't want to speak for him, but this is the pants on fire. How are we going to keep everyone safe calendar the best way we can? So if he's putting something out here for us to digest, I mean, kudos for him doing that. At the end of the day, he's going to do what he has to do and make the decisions. So I appreciate the foresight and in being able to look at some of this. I appreciate the opportunity to provide some commentary and feedback. and hope that we don't ever have to implement this calendar, to Tom's point and Ellen's point.
Great, thank you. Ms. Taylor.
My question was asked.
Thank you. Ms. Grund.
So I would say if we had to do a COVID calendar, I would take this one over the one that was in our agenda packet. But I'm about consistency. The having the breaks off here, there, everywhere, kids being remote, then coming back in school. You look at May, we have the end of April, we have April break. First week, we're going to do remote learning, and then they're coming to AP tests. Not great timing. It's consistency. I really would like to see if we could somehow keep with a regular calendar, going to what Ellen and Tom said, and make the hybrid learning work somehow if we need to do that. And it'll be interesting though, because high school, you'll have some kids that are going to be age eligible to get a vaccine this summer and other kids who won't be, because right now 17, 18, maybe the 14, 15-year-olds won't. So we're going to have a mix in the high school of who might have the vaccine and who won't. So it's going to be interesting. So it's definitely worth a discussion. So I'm glad we're talking about it now.
Great, thank you. Ms. Kuzma.
I think it's smart to warn parents ahead of time that we might be needing to look at remote weeks after vacations and things like that. It's a warning, those can be pulled back. The actual days off can't be pulled back. I am not in favor of the full week in October. I could maybe see a 4-day weekend, but a full week off in October and starting that early in August is a no-go for me.
Ms. Beam.
Yeah, I mean, I could almost say echo, but I would just like to say, think of how exciting it is to get a snow day, and how being able to do remote days instead of snow days, it might be nice to have a mix that maybe we only do, if there's power outages, if it's an early snow that's heavy and you don't have power, well, then what is your choice, right? And think of how that feels. And so if they need a mental break, I would entertain a 4-day weekend. I think is enough break and enough something that you could look forward to without having to put a burden on families to have an entire week that not only, remote is one thing, but then to say, oh no, you're entertaining them all day, you're everything. That's a big ask. I remember very well being a single parent and being so insanely grateful that for the most part I had grandparent backup. But you know what? Not everybody's got camp grandma. And so we have to be mindful of that. And so I wonder if we couldn't get the same result from a shorter break. I'm not against something, but probably not beyond a 4-day weekend.
Ms. Taylor.
My question was around athletics. On the weeks that you're saying go remote for the entire school, if a student goes remote, they can still participate in practices and competitions. But if the whole school is in remote mode, can those things continue?
Yeah, Laura, we would work to make sure athletics could continue, and it's much safer if the school's fully remote, right? Because there's not that mixing during the day, and the teams are all basically one bubble anyway. So I'm comfortable saying that that's something we could work with.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Lawrence.
Thank you. I'm going to echo what Beth said, and I think that the August start is disturbing. I think that the week in October I think it would really mess with the flow of getting back into school just when kids are starting to get into the swing of it. To suddenly release them for a week doesn't feel right. I would maybe make the alternative that be a remote week instead of a full off week if you wanted to do something different that week, but I would not be in favor of that. Thanks.
Mr. Steele, I'm assuming you want to pull down your weather balloon here.
Thank you for giving me a chance to pull the eject handle. So I was not looking for approval tonight. This was a chance to gather feedback from the board. I've heard the feedback, and this is very helpful, believe it or not. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how you as community representatives, as school board members would feel about these things. And so this is me starting to prepare us for the work that we have to do over the 6 months to begin our next school year. So I've heard the feedback. I got it. It's very, very helpful in us starting to frame how we start to move forward. So I'm good. That's all I need from tonight.
Awesome. John, since the issue has been pulled off the table, did you have a comment that you want to make about something else as well?
I just want to remind that there are 4 calendars in the play right now. Okay, 4. There's the approved, there's the draft in the packet, there's the one Adam showed us, and there's the one in Adam's start time presentation. Okay, so there's a lot going on calendar. So I just wanted to remind everyone that there are 4 in play, and looking for Adam's next iteration, and just keep us apprised as things develop. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Eckhoff.
Yeah, I'll be real quick. I just would like to say that, you know, to the point of a 4-day weekend, which I agree with, you could do a Friday and a Columbus Day weekend on Monday. So you could do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and that would give you a nice jump there. So maybe that's a solution, but anyway.
Great, thank you. This now leads us to our last public comment period. Members of the public, if you would like to address the board, any comments or questions or concerns regarding the content for this evening, or things that you'd like to address the board for future issues or concerns, now's your opportunity. And I invite you to use the raise your hand feature and be called upon, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. Again, leveraging the use your hand feature, raise your hand feature, you have the opportunity to go ahead and address your school board. Great. Mr. Greer, you actually have the floor for 3 minutes. Please state your name, address, and your town of residence.
Okay, Nathan Greer, Boylston Terrace, Amherst. I just want to make a comment about the bus routes from earlier. I put this in the question and answer, but I don't know if that'll be seen. I just want to say kids may be safer in groups at a bus stop, but they still have to get to that bus stop. Sometimes that's individually or maybe with one other sibling. And that's, you know, that's as unsafe as being at a bus stop alone. And in my past 2 years of, or 2 or 3 years of seeing bus routes, elementary bus routes, they usually only have stops added once the school year starts, and parents see the bus routes and the stops, and so you usually see stops get added because of concerns about dangerous road and traffic concerns. So I would not expect to see bus routes shortened in terms of that being an option for shortening the school day. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other members of the community like to address your school board? We had 4 names pop up there, and it looked like they all disappeared there. Final call. Any members of the public like to address your school board? Great, seeing none. Mr. Superintendent, do we have any non-public for this evening?
No, sir.
Great. We are at the close. I want to thank not only my fellow colleagues on the board for their time, their effort, and really their thought process as we navigate through a pretty important topic to our communities. I want to thank you for your due diligence and the efforts that you shared with your peers tonight. Also thank the members of the public for joining us. It's very important to continue that type of dialogue. It allows us to do our jobs more effectively and more efficiently for you. And for that, I personally appreciate that. So now, without any other items on the agenda, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make the motion to adjourn.
Ms. Kuzma makes the motion. Second is by Ms. Facey. I don't think we even need to do a roll call vote. We can do them all right away. Raise your hands. Great. I see it's unanimous for Miss Dene. And anybody opposed, actually, I got to say it that way too. There are no oppositions. So have a great evening, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. And we'll meet again in March.
Thank you.